Did the FBI really try to start a violent street war between the Italian-American mafia and American communists? Did it encourage a black street gang leader to assassinate a leading civil rights activist? Did it have serial killings on its books? Was it a major creator of fake news? What about the assassinations of JFK and MLK? Were we told the truth and nothing but the truth? This show is about those secrets from the darkest corners of American law enforcement. Number 50. Seek and Destroy. In 1956, the FBI launched COINTELPRO, a program that at first was to snuff out possible communists in the US, but evolved into the FBI going after civil rights groups, socialists, feminists, anti-war activists, actors, pop singers, writers, artists, and anyone else they deemed to be dangerous to the status quo. A now declassified FBI memo said the agent should expose, disrupt, misdirect, discredit, or otherwise neutralize such groups or people. You can guess what neutralizing could mean. The FBI was deadly serious. As you'll see throughout the video, the FBI's actions at times wouldn't have looked out of place in bloodthirsty dictatorships. A difference was their objective was to polarize society and get people to hate, fear, or even kill each other rather than using excessive force themselves. However, as you'll see, excessive force did happen. Let's now go down an FBI rabbit hole, maybe one of the darkest rabbit holes you've never heard of, in which the FBI were the good guys. Kind of. Number 49. You scratch my back, I'll scratch yours. This one is an example of how the CIA and FBI worked at cross purposes at times, always in secret, of course. Speaking of dictators who were partial to torture and murder, let us introduce Rafael El Jefe Leonidas Trujillo, the ruthless maniac who ruled the Dominican Republic from 1930 to 1961 with what you might call an iron fist with spikes on it. As you probably know, during the Cold War, the CIA helped overthrow democracies if those democracies did not play ball with American corporations or were considered overly leftist or nationalistic. In some cases, it was just about leaders trying to nationalize their country's natural resources or give land rights to the poor, which didn't bode well for their relationship with various powerful people in the US. The CIA would effectively rearrange such nations, but it had no issues with El Jefe's Dominican Republic, which usually played ball. It was secretly supported with CIA money and outwardly supported by Vice President Richard Nixon. Dictators like El Jefe clamped down on entities like leftist labor unions or human rights activists. With that iron fist of his, he literally fed labor activists to the sharks. One of them was an FBI informant. His name was Jesus Galindez, an activist and academic who wrote scathing papers on the brutality happening in the country. As you can imagine, El Jefe didn't much like his barbarity being made public knowledge all over the world. He would have killed Galindez in a heartbeat, but Galindez skipped over to the US, where he thought he'd be safe. As we said, he'd actually secretly been working as an FBI informant, telling the FBI what he knew about former Nazis hiding out in Latin America. The FBI then asked him to spy on communist-affiliated people in the US who had joined the anti-Francisco Franco movement. Reports say Galindez refused to spy on certain communists, but he kept close ties with the FBI throughout his time in the US, where he taught at Columbia University. A declassified FBI report said Galindez was an invaluable informant, and his reports were extremely detailed, accurate, and thorough. This didn't bode well for him. Number 48. Breaking backs. Galindez was becoming a problem. He told an FBI agent in April 1955, while they were in Miami, that the U.S. Undersecretary of State John Foster Dulles had helped create some of the blackest pages of international relations in Latin American history. This was because the U.S. was supporting a brutal dictator, which it would eventually do in other parts of Latin America and beyond. According to the book The Devil's Chessboard, Allen Dulles, the CIA, and the Rise of America's Secret Government, Galindez told the agent, "Never before in the history of the world has a government more effectively supported dictatorial powers in the free nations." Galindez was well known for bravely speaking his mind, but during the Cold War, that could seriously affect a person's life expectancy. Despite his criticism of Dulles, the FBI kept him on the payroll at $125 a month. He was useful, and for the FBI boss, J. Edgar Hoover, having an informant who had dirt on people was never a bad thing. The FBI secretly helped Galindez get American citizenship, but the agency knew his life was in danger when he was about to publish a long paper on El Jefe's brutality. 5 days before he vanished, the FBI wrote in a now declassified memo that Galindez's critical thesis on El Jefe would cause him some, quote, difficulties. The 450-page dissertation he wrote was published and soon became a bestseller in Latin America. To say he would have difficulties doing this was an understatement. The American historian Alan Wells wrote that Galíndez knew he was a dead man walking. Number 47. Hoover saw a dark conspiracy. One night after teaching a class at Columbia, Galíndez disappeared. No one knew at that point, not even the FBI, that employees had nabbed him at a private detective firm run by Robert A. Mayhew, a sketchy businessman who was close to the CIA, but not close enough to not be expendable. His firm's agents were all former CIA and FBI agents. The agency was useful to CIA boss Allen Dulles, brother of John, who could use it for various secret and often dark activities, since his own CIA men were not supposed to do what they did inside the U.S. The CIA put Mayhew's agency on a $500 a month retainer. Mayhew is famous for being the man who offered Chicago Mafia mobster Johnny Rosselli $150,000 to assassinate Cuban leader Fidel Castro. That's what you get for $500 a month, a man who did your very shady business for you. Mayhew is less well known for helping to spirit Galíndez out of the U.S. He had his guys with a nurse drug Galíndez in the back of a limo, and then they threw him on a plane. You could only imagine what happened when El Jefe got hold of Galíndez. He reportedly had him hooked to a pulley, hoisted up and lowered into a vat of boiling water. He was boiled alive, and then the rest was thrown to the sharks. Another story says he was shot, but there were rumors that say El Jefe first made Galíndez eat his own feces and then boiled him in a cauldron at a warehouse near a sugar plantation. This was major news, given this man had gone missing from U.S. soil. The CIA under Dulles put pressure on the NYPD Intelligence Bureau officials to take care of this very delicate matter. Dulles also used friendly journalists to write misinformation about Galíndez running away with $1 million of CIA money. They called him a witting tool of the communists. But the smear campaign only worked for a certain amount of time. Still, it did what it was supposed to, make the public concentrate on the character, not the actual crime. Then the matters became even darker. The pilot who flew the plane that Galíndez was taken on, Gerald Murphy, had found out from seeing photos in the press who the guy was that he had on his plane. He got drunk a few too many times and told friends in bars about that fateful flight. It's reported that he bragged about possibly using that evidence for blackmail or other means of earning money, something El Jefe didn't exactly appreciate. It should be said, Murphy did not know the purpose of the flight when it happened. He'd become a mercenary pilot because he couldn't get into the Air Force. He was 23 and loved his exciting job, but he was not privy to everything going on around him. After telling the story a few too many times, he was never seen again. It's believed he also got the shark treatment after being hanged by El Jefe. The New York Times, citing someone's testimony, wrote in 1964, the pilot crumpled to the ground, and the two policemen then placed a rope around his neck and each pulled it until Mr. Murphy was choked to death. Americans didn't know this at the time, but foul play was suspected after Murphy's Ford car was found abandoned near a slaughterhouse and he was missing. It became major news. It caused an uproar and the FBI took an interest. Hoover, who it said was furious about his valuable informant plus an American pilot being murdered, had his men investigate. Many years later, the agency would declassify 10,000 pages of records on the Galíndez kidnapping. In the 9 months after Galíndez was murdered, 5 other people were assassinated by El Jefe's men in what was an attempt at a cover-up. Murphy's co-pilot was offed, as was the nurse who administered the sedative to Galíndez, as were 2 airport employees and a colonel in El Jefe's security services. 3 of these people were American. This led to a young U.S. congressman named Charles Porter pushing for answers. Meanwhile, El Jefe spent millions trying to pull in favors. Alan Wells wrote, Trujillo spent an estimated $6 million to discredit this victim, rehabilitate his image abroad, buy off witnesses, call in favors from U.S. senators and congressmen who he had wined and dined in the past, and bribe members of the Fourth Estate or journalists. Hoover discovered a dark underworld of sketchy former CIA agents and contract killers doing some very dirty work for dictators on American soil. He leaked the story to Life magazine, which ran the headline, "The Story of a Dark International Conspiracy." As you'll see later, the CIA and the FBI were experts at leaking stories to the media, sometimes untrue stories, but this one was real. Someone had to take the fall for Galíndez's death, and that man was a man named John Joseph Frank, a former FBI and CIA agent who was said to have arranged the kidnapping. The press didn't talk about Mayhew at the time. Frank had gone rogue, said the media, and was on the payroll of El Jefe. Some researchers believe that the CIA actually planned it with El Jefe, but that hasn't been proven. An American author and an attorney named Stuart McKeever filed a lawsuit against the CIA in 2013 in regard to the case. Frank's story appeared in the press while the Justice Department discussed it with the CIA. Dulles informed the department that this was a matter of national security. The Justice Department ended up having to let Frank get off with a mere fine after he threatened to subpoena several CIA agents. The CIA General Counsel, Lawrence Houston, is supposed to have said that the CIA would be embarrassed if it were forced to produce those witnesses. In the end, no one was ever charged with the murders of Murphy or Galindez or the others. The CIA evidently had enough of El Jefe by 1961 because it helped with his assassination. El Jefe's murder spree was just too much. He had to go. A declassified CIA internal memorandum disclosed the CIA's quite extensive agency involvement with the plotters. That's just a taste of how the FBI and the CIA didn't always meet eye to eye in those days. You'll see more of that later. Number 46. Reds under the bed. The U.S. went through a period of national hysteria when Senator Joseph McCarthy went on a witch hunt, alleging communists had infiltrated every part of the U.S. government, Hollywood, high society, just about everywhere else. He also went after alleged homosexuals since homosexuality was prohibited. He destroyed lives, he ruined careers, so naturally, the FBI's J. Edgar Hoover and the CIA's Allen Dulles made sure he couldn't come after them. Each of these men had compromising files on each other. One of the files Hoover had on McCarthy, should he ever need it, stated that there was evidence McCarthy had groped the breasts of girls. The Chicago Tribune once wrote that he couldn't keep his hands off young members of the opposite sex. The question is, did someone leak this story? Number 45. Dulles versus Hoover. Dulles and Hoover didn't much like each other. As we've just shown you, the FBI and CIA often worked at cross purposes. They were always looking for bigger budgets and more power. They were also very different, with Dulles being highly educated and quite posh, and Hoover being much more of a down-to-earth kind of guy. Hoover once called Dulles an arrogant, pompous Prussian, and another time he said he was a puffed-up nitwit. They were polite to each other, of course. In a declassified letter Dulles sent to Hoover in 1956, it read, "It's a fine tribute to a great organization of which our country is rightfully proud. I feel it a privilege to have had the opportunity which Zany's present work affords of working with you. Faithfully yours, Allen V. Dulles." Dulles, who some historians have said had psychopathic tendencies, was often very cold to his wife. He cheated on her constantly. Guess who knew? Hoover knew, and he kept a secret file on all of Dulles's extramarital activities just in case he one day needed it. Number 44. Dulles versus Hoover, solidarity. They also worked together. In 2014, the New York Times wrote the headline, "In Cold War, U.S. spy agencies used 1,000 Nazis." Dulles brought the Nazis to the U.S., and Hoover kept it quiet. The Times wrote, FBI officials refused to even tell the Justice Department's own Nazi hunters what they knew about 16 suspected Nazis living in the United States. Those 16 were informants for the FBI. The Times wrote that one of them was an SS officer, Otto von Bolschwing, who the Times said was a mentor and top aide to Adolf Eichmann, architect of the Final Solution, and wrote policy papers on how to terrorize Jews. This was hugely controversial when it came out in 1981 during a court case, but von Bolschwig was suffering from ill health at the time, and he died in a nursing home in sunny California in 1982. Number 43. Dulles versus Hoover 3. You won't be surprised to hear that Dulles had secret files on Hoover. It's well known that Hoover was close to his deputy, Clyde Tolson. They were like man and wife. They went everywhere together and spent Christmas together. The rumors about their homosexual relationship flooded Washington and beyond. Dulles told friends and allies that he had photographic evidence of Hoover and Tolson engaging in oral sex. Maybe that's why Hoover stated in one file on Dulles that Dulles had secret communist leanings. He didn't. Dulles did a lot of things, but supporting communism was not one of them. Number 42. Hoover's perverts. Despite Hoover's reported sexual orientation, he supported and took part in a war against American homosexuals, which became known as the Lavender Scare. This has been called the U.S. government's systematic persecution of homosexuals, people deemed perverted and sexually deviant. During the 1950s and 60s, hundreds of people, mostly men, lost their government jobs due to accusations that they liked or loved people of the same sex. In 1953 alone, the State Department said it had fired 425 staff due to their alleged homosexuality. You can't blame the FBI for all of this. but Hoover certainly played his part in the witch hunts along with McCarthy and the prosecutor Roy Cohn. Number 41. Truman's warning. President Harry Truman wasn't quite as on board with the hunt for homosexuals. In a statement he once made, he said, "We want no Gestapo or secret police. FBI is tending in that direction. They are dabbling in sex life scandals and plain blackmail. Edgar Hoover would give his right eye to take over, and all congressmen and senators are afraid of him." They were all scared of each other, but so much of what was happening was kept classified. Number 40. Official blackmail. Cohn himself was rumored to be a homosexual, although he always denied it, saying it was a smear campaign. In an interview in 1985, another journalist called him the most virulently anti-gay guy you could imagine. Yet the famous lobbyist Roger Stone said Cohn had a liking for the young and blonde of the human male species. Cohn was widely known to have represented some of the biggest names in the Italian-American mafia. Some of those people said Cohn kept photographs of Hoover with his male friends. It's believed that he kept those images for possible blackmail. Number 39. The bathroom bust. In 1956, a Harvard-educated astronomer, Dr. Franklin E. Kameny, who was hoping to go far in the USA space program, suddenly lost his job. He'd been attending an astronomy conference in San Francisco when someone busted down the door of a bathroom stall he was inhabiting with another man. Little did he know that he'd been one of the men who was listed in the thousands of documents in the FBI's very secret sex deviates file. His arrest wasn't the end of the matter. Number 38. The spying continues. After his arrest, Kameny was one of the 16 men who met at the Hay Adams Hotel in Washington, right across from the White House, to plan the foundation of a national gay rights organization named the Mattachine Society of Washington. You won't be surprised to hear that Hoover's men knew the meeting was taking place, despite it being kept a secret. A declassified 1,000-page FBI file stated that the hotel manager was listening to the meeting, and he went straight back to the FBI and told Hoover's desk what he'd heard. The FBI files say these men were a national security risk. Hoover actually had an informant in the society, leading to some men losing their jobs. It didn't stop there. Number 37. The tangled web. On August 28, 1963, the famed civil rights activist Martin Luther King gave his most renowned speech to a crowd of 250,000 people at the Lincoln Memorial in Washington, D.C. King talked about black people living on a lonely island of poverty in the midst of a vast ocean of material prosperity, and he said he had a dream, which included that my 4 children will one day live in a nation where they will not be judged by the color of their skin, but by the content of their character. In the crowd were Kameny and other members of the Mattachine Society of Washington. The FBI was watching them. The agency not only feared black activism, but a classified report said King's speech might inspire the first ever public speech relating to gay activism. This had never been done in the U.S. The FBI was right. On April 17, 1965, the Society gave a speech in Washington in front of the White House, comparing their treatment to gays under Fidel Castro's government, which had just announced it was going to send its own so-called sexual deviants to labor camps. The media didn't really cover it, but the FBI was certainly watching, photographing license plates and faces. Now let's talk about one of the most controversial matters in FBI history. Number 36. The MLK Files. As you'll know, despite Martin Luther King's emphasis on nonviolent protests, he was regarded as a danger to American society by a large number of establishment figures. These figures were numerous since King fought for civil rights and labor rights and also took an anti-war stance. He was a veritable thorn in the side of people such as Allen Dulles and J. Edgar Hoover. It's hardly shocking then that the FBI had a big file on King. Thanks to Freedom of Information requests, we now know that the CIA did too, even though it wasn't supposed to get involved with domestic issues. Those files show the CIA wanted to use disinformation to discredit King in the media, the eternal go-to tactic that sadly usually works. The files show that the CIA said it had highly derogatory information on him, which it said included King having contact with pro-communist types. A separate CIA memo talked about the risk of King being assassinated, adding that this would backfire because it would make him a martyr. The CIA was right. He was assassinated in 1968 and he became a martyr. The Washington Post wrote, as he lay dying, the popular beatification was already underway. Martin Luther King Jr., general and martyr to the greatest moral crusade on the nation's racial battlefield. This video is about the FBI, not the CIA, but we thought it was important to show you that the FBI and CIA often worked in tandem. Now let's look at what the FBI planned to do with King. Number 35. The MLK Files 2. After the famous 1975 Church Committee investigation into abuses by the FBI, CIA, NSA, and IRS, it wrote, from December 1963 until his death in 1968, Martin Luther King Jr. was the target of an intensive campaign by the Federal Bureau of Investigation to neutralize him as an effective civil rights leader. The surveillance showed that King had plenty of extramarital affairs, something the FBI leaked to the press. The surveillance also tried to make out that King was a communist, although, unlike the philandering, this wasn't true. There were more allegations against him, some of which were very serious, but these haven't been confirmed. More declassified files that should be released in 2027 might get closer to the truth. That's because, as it stands, some of the files are hard to interpret. But the original surveillance tapes, which may tell all, will be unsealed according to a judge's order in 2027. The next part is nothing less than unbelievable. Number 34. The Letter. The FBI's most outrageous effort to get rid of King was the so-called FBI King Letter. It was sent to him by the FBI, although anonymously. It was posted along with tape recordings from FBI wiretaps that were evidence of King's extramarital affairs. Part of the letter read, "The American public, the church organizations that have been helping, Protestants, Catholics, and Jews will know you for what you are, an evil beast. So will others who have backed you. You are done. King, there is only one thing left for you to do. There is but one way out for you. You better take it before your filthy, fraudulent self is bared to the nation." YouTube moderation won't allow us to tell you what they wanted King to do, but we think you can figure it out. It didn't work. Some people believe the FBI took matters a step further. Number 33. Killing King. There have been plenty of theories about the assassination of MLK. One of them comes from allegations made by a man named Lloyd Jowers, a former Memphis tavern owner, and another man named Donald Wilson, a former FBI agent. They suggest King was killed as part of a government conspiracy. Number 32. The Conspiracy. We won't get too deep into the weeds since that would be a show all itself, but the theories state that the man convicted of King's murder, James Earl Ray, either didn't kill King or was part of a bigger conspiracy, possibly involving the FBI and other officials who may have also been part of the JFK assassination. The theories, like with JFK, are not insubstantial. In 1979, the United States House Select Committee on Assassinations, HSCA, said a conspiracy in the assassination of King was likely, adding that Ray could have been a scapegoat. In 1999, a jury at a Memphis civil suit reached a unanimous verdict. They said King was assassinated in a U.S. government conspiracy. There's more. Number 31. Coretta King. King's wife, Coretta, said that after looking at the evidence, she believed her husband was taken out by the government, or at least shady parts of the government. She said, "There is an abundance of evidence of a major high-level conspiracy in the assassination of my husband." She talked to Robert F. Kennedy, a man who believed his own brother John F. Kennedy might have been assassinated as part of a government conspiracy. RFK told her he'd try to get to the bottom of her husband's murder. King and RFK had had mixed relations in the past. While RFK had been the one to approve Hoover's wiretap on King, they agreed on many issues relating to war, poverty, and racism. King said he would support RFK's run for presidency. RFK later made a speech about King's death, saying, among other things, "What we need in the United States is not division. What we need in the United States is not hatred. What we need in the United States is not violence or lawlessness, but love, wisdom, and compassion toward one another." Maybe such sentiments were lethal. RFK was murdered himself almost exactly 2 months later. Number 30. Hoover and JFK. In a now declassified memo 2 days after JFK was assassinated, Hoover emphasized that the public must be led to believe that Lee Harvey Oswald had acted alone. Oswald, who'd just been murdered himself, was mentioned in the files made publicly available in 2017. In the memo, Hoover wrote, "There is nothing further on the Oswald case except that he is dead. He meant that's all people need to know, so leave matters alone." Hoover wasn't happy with the Dallas police force. Number 29. Hoover and Oswald. As many researchers have pointed out, the fact that Jack Ruby was able to walk right up to Oswald and shoot him is at the very least a bit strange. Ruby, who had connections with organized crime and allegedly also with Cuban exiles who'd worked with the CIA, had been an informant for the FBI. He should not have been able to get into the Dallas police headquarters so easily, say some of the conspiracy theorists. especially as someone had made an anonymous tip the night before that someone was going to kill Oswald. In his secret memo, Hoover said he told the Dallas police that there was a risk someone would kill Oswald. He wrote, "Oswald having been killed today after our warnings to the Dallas Police Department was inexcusable. It will allow, I am afraid, a lot of civil rights people to raise a lot of hell because he was handcuffed and had no weapon. There are bound to be some elements of our society who will holler their heads off that his civil rights were violated, which they were. It gets better." Number 28. More files released. In 1963, the FBI received a memo from CIA counterintelligence chief James Angleton. The memo had said just 25 minutes before JFK was shot, a man described as an anonymous tipster had made a call to a British news reporter and urged him to call the American embassy in London for some big news, and hung up. Number 27. Fireworks. Ruby also seemed to know something big was going to happen. Declassified FBI files showed that on the day of JFK's assassination, he told his FBI handler that something explosive was on its way. The released FBI file dated April 6, 1977 said, the informant stated that on the morning of the assassination, Ruby contacted him and asked if he would like to watch the fireworks. He was with Jack Ruby and standing at the corner of the Postal Annex building, facing the Texas School Book Depository building at the time of the shooting. Immediately after the shooting, Ruby left and headed toward the area of the Dallas Morning News building. Files like these have turned non-skeptics into skeptics, as well as what comes next. Number 26. Another letter. The Justice Department in 1975 said it was investigating a letter that Oswald had delivered in person to the FBI Dallas office just before JFK was murdered. The letter explained how he would blow up the office if the FBI didn't stop harassing his wife, Marina. It is true that Agent James P. Hosty Jr. had visited the house where Marina was staying. He had wanted to talk to her about her entry into the United States, something her husband evidently didn't like. The letter was left with reception, but destroyed shortly after JFK was killed. The New York Times wrote, FBI officials were understood today to be distressed over the letter incident, which until a few weeks ago had not been known outside the Bureau and not widely known within it. Many years later, Hosty admitted that he'd been ordered to destroy the letter by J. Gordon Shanklin, the then chief of the FBI operations in Dallas. Shanklin denied ever seeing the letter or even knowing about it. Hosty said Shanklin was quite agitated and upset about the note and told him to destroy it, but he didn't. Then, 2 days after JFK died, Hosty, on orders from Shanklin, really did destroy it by ripping it up and flushing it down the toilet. Number 25. What the FBI knew. Some people say Oswald was an FBI informant. Yet William C. Sullivan, one of the highest-ranking FBI officials, wrote in a memo on January 30, 1964, to Assistant FBI Director A.H. Belmont that Oswald was never an FBI informant, was never paid money for information, was never assigned any symbol number. Number 24. Hoover's worries. As you now know, Hoover was worried that people would start thinking more than one person had killed the JFK. Just before Oswald's death, Hoover stated in a memo, "Last night we received a call from our Dallas office from a man talking in a calm voice and saying he was a member of a committee organized to kill Oswald. That's why he called the Dallas cops and told them that they should keep an eye on Oswald and ensure no one got near him." Now let's take a look at when the FBI became killers. We'll return to the topic of Oswald later. Number 23. The Black Messiah. The FBI was also partial to the art of assassination, it seems. One such man who felt the brunt of the FBI's wrath was Fred Hampton, an activist for the Black Panthers whom Hoover called the Black Messiah. Prior to taking part in his execution, the FBI tried to sow the seeds of disunity in the party by planting their own men among the Panthers. A series of memos Hoover wrote shows that he was willing to go to the most extreme lengths to wipe out these activists. Number 22. The Hit. On December 4, 1964, when Hampton was 21, the FBI orchestrated an armed raid with the Chicago police on Hampton's apartment at 2337 West Monroe Street on Chicago's west side. At the time, Hampton was with his friend and bodyguard, William O'Neill. Little did Hampton know that O'Neill was working with the FBI. That night, he spiked Hampton's drink with a strong drug, although it's debated to this day what that drug was. The upshot was Hampton falling asleep. The hit squad, armed with an apartment layout thanks to O'Neill, busted through the door. A declassified memo stated about the floor plan that this information is of considerable value in consideration of a special payment for informant requested in re-Chicago letter. O'Neill was paid $300 by the FBI, something that would later help prove the FBI had played a major role in what looked like an assassination. Hampton was still sleeping with his pregnant girlfriend when the guns started blasting. Other Black Panthers were also sleeping. They first shot 22-year-old Mark Clark, who was sitting guard with a shotgun on his lap in the living room. He died instantly. The gun went off as he fell. Then all hell broke loose. They fired between 82 and 99 rounds, spraying the walls and hitting several people. No one had the chance to fire back. Hampton's girlfriend, who was less than a month away from giving birth, was hit but survived. Police dragged her away from Hampton, who'd been trying to shield her from the bullets. In a later court case, her lawyer said she heard one officer ask, "Is he, Hampton, still alive?" Then she heard 2 gunshots and another officer said, "He's good and dead now." It was later confirmed that Hampton had been in a drugged haze and never even got out of the bed. The autopsy said he'd been shot at close range with 2 bullets to the head. This looked like premeditated murder by the FBI and the Chicago cops. The media echoed what State's Attorney Edward Hanrahan said, that there had been a pitched gun battle. In 1970, a judge ruled on the deaths of Clark and Hampton to be justifiable homicide. But in a years-long civil case, a group of defendants accepted a settlement of $1.85 million. Number 21. The files come out. The assassination of Hampton was controversial, given some people thought the police had rightly acted against violent and dangerous radicals, and others said that this was a premeditated hit on activists. Much of the public at first went with the second theory, but then those declassified files revealed that this was all orchestrated by the FBI. It wasn't a police visit gone wrong, it was a planned hit. The New York Times in 1982 wrote, "The FBI had played a significant role in events leading to the raid, as part of its counterintelligence program against groups that J. Edgar Hoover, the Bureau's director, perceived as subversives." This was all about the time that a lot of dirt came out on the FBI. Number 20. White radicals. The FBI went after anyone that they believed was radical, not just black activists. One of their targets was the cheeky and quick-thinking Liverpudlian John Lennon of Beatles fame. His anti-war stance and all that give peace a chance talk wasn't welcome in the US where he was now living. Not welcome by the FBI, at least. Most Americans loved the Beatles and liked Lennon's solo work, but such were the polarizing times that many others also hated Lennon. For a man who'd sung about being an eggplant, the FBI had taken him very, very seriously. There was a cache of files on Lennon as long as your arm. In one of the documents Hoover wrote in 1972, Lennon has taken an interest in extreme left-wing activities in Britain and is known to be a sympathizer of Trotskyist communities in England. The FBI had not wanted to release any of these files, citing national security concerns. They also reported that Lennon had a friend named Linda who owned a parrot that interjects right on whenever the conversation gets rousing. Arguably the biggest threat to national security was, at the moment, how embarrassing this looked for the FBI. How much time and money had been spent on watching a talking hippie parrot? Lennon was soon out of the FBI's hair anyway. He was assassinated in the street in New York City by a man named Mark Chapman in December 1980. Peace was evidently not going to be given a chance. We should say here that some FBI agents did not believe in some of those harsh tactics. A declassified file shows Hoover's response to an agent who complained about the job at hand. Hoover said, "You state that the Bureau under the CIP should not attack programs of community interest. You state that this is because many prominent humanitarians, both white and black, are interested in the program, as well as churches which are actively supporting it. You have obviously missed the point." Number 19. Murder and mayhem. The FBI had a file on a man who caused absolute havoc on American streets when he took part in the CIA's mind control program, MKUltra. The man was a former Narcotics Bureau agent named George Hunter White, a heavy drinker and a drug taker who'd helped make arrests of drug takers in the 1930s under Harry Anslinger, the Commissioner of Narcotics. White knew the streets. He knew the dealers, the gangsters, the hitmen. So the CIA got him to run a safe house under Operation Midnight Climax, in which White and other agents watched through two-way mirrors as prostitutes they'd paid spiked their clients' drinks with LSD. White also went into bars and put LSD in people's drinks. He did this to his wife's friends, some of whom needed years of counseling after. How does a man who does these kind of things avoid FBI detection? The answer is he didn't. The FBI had a file on White stating he'd once attended a British sabotage school run in Canada. This was better known as Camp X. It was described as a place to learn sabotage techniques, subversion, intelligence gathering, lock-picking, explosives training, radio communications, recruiting techniques for partisans, the art of silent killing, and unarmed combat. White called it the School of Murder and Mayhem. White, who is undoubtedly one of the craziest Americans who ever worked in law enforcement and deserves 10 movies to be made about him, once said in a letter to Anslinger, "I was a very minor missionary, actually a heretic, but I toiled wholeheartedly in the vineyards because it was fun. Where else could a red-blooded American boy lie, kill, cheat, steal, and pillage with the sanction and blessing of the All-Highest?" He also said the R word, which YouTube won't let us utter, related to sexual matters. Number 18. The FBI was on to White. According to White's diaries, which were found after he died from alcohol-related liver disease, the FBI might have been on to him and his safe houses. One of his diary entries reads, 81 Bedford Safe House, call Anslinger. He says the FBI knows about it. M has been pumped by the FBI, neighbors, etc. Another file the FBI had on White, which was later declassified, said White was part of an ultra-secret assignment as a consultant. This was related to MKUltra, of course. It wasn't something the CIA was going to share with the FBI. In a separate related file also sent to Hoover, it says that Redacted handled FBI agents some of the knockout drops used by White and also some of the truth serum White had used. The latter was probably LSD. As for the knockout drops, take your pick. Number 17. Mr. Olson's fall. The FBI also had files on Frank Olson, the American biological warfare scientist who worked on MKUltra. He very mysteriously flew out of a hotel window in New York in 1953 after it was discovered that he might open his mouth in regard to sensitive information about MKUltra and the novel ways the CIA interrogated people. It's hard to know what the FBI made of his death, since much of the file is redacted, it looks like to protect certain names. Olson's family has claimed that he was thrown out of the window, and the evidence suggests that's a real possibility, but no one has ever been arrested over it. Number 16. Alleged smear campaign. As we've said, the FBI has engaged in smear campaigns in the past. It may have been done in the not-so-distant past, although we don't have the declassified files yet. In 2011, a former CIA officer said he'd been asked to collect damaging information on the Middle East expert and Iraq war critic, Professor Juan Cole. The University of Michigan academic sued both the CIA and FBI for what he said was a targeted smear campaign against him by the two agencies on the orders of President George W. Bush. Number 15. Definite smear campaign. Thanks to declassified files, we now know on March 6, 1959, Hoover told his staff to investigate subversive factors in the media, either journalists or publishers, who he said could be discrediting our American way of life. The practice was to get dirt on such people so the U.S. public would ignore whatever they said. Number 14. The FBI abroad. The CIA is usually the agency that affects change abroad. However, after and during the war, the Franklin D. Roosevelt administration sent 700 FBI agents to Mexico, Brazil, Chile, Argentina, and other parts of Latin America under the Special Intelligence Service. This was mostly top secret, dedicated to finding Nazis, Nazi spies, or smugglers and propagandists working for the Axis powers. Hoover then shifted the SIS's focus more toward communism. A book on the matter states that, unlike the CIA, the FBI did not take executive action in Latin America, meaning removing politicians and activists. Though, through extensive surveillance, Hoover only compiled dossiers on foreign leftists he deemed possibly troublesome. Number 13. The KKK. On March 25, 1965, the civil rights activist Viola Liuzzo was driving a car from Selma to Montgomery in the state of Alabama when 4 members of the Ku Klux Klan started to follow her and Leroy Motton, a young black man who was in the car with her. At one point, the chase car pulled up alongside them and opened fire. The reason for this attack was Liuzzo's support of civil rights and voting rights for African Americans. Motton survived, Liuzzo did not. One of the men in the chase car was actually an FBI informant. It didn't look too good that an agent was with violent racist people, so Hoover decided to do something about it. The U.S. public discovered many years later that he started a smear campaign against Liuzzo to take people's minds off the FBI. He fashioned a completely untrue story that she was an unstable harlot who had left her kids and husband to go cause trouble in the South. Hoover made up a file on her, sent it to politicians, and leaked it to the media. Part of it said the police had found puncture marks in her arm, indicating recent use of a hypodermic needle. And it added that she was sitting very, very close to that African-American man in the car, that it has the appearance of a necking party. Only through the Freedom of Information Act in 1978 did the public ever discover that this was a bunch of cruel lies. The problem with smear campaigns is that they tend to work because they come from what people believe are trusted sources. Liuzzo was no drug user and was not a cheat, but that's what many people thought for a long time. The three killers were convicted of conspiracy to intimidate African Americans under the 1871 Ku Klux Klan Act. They were handed 10-year prison sentences, while the informant acted as a witness to the crime and went into the Federal Witness Protection Program. Now let's take a look at Hoover's take on UFOs. Number 12. UFOs. In September 1947, Hoover wrote to Air Force General George McDonnell about the FBI's role in the spate of UFO sightings. Hoover said he was not interested in relieving this Air Force of running down incidents, which in many cases turned out to be ashcan covers, toilet seats, and whatnot. We guess Hoover wasn't much of a believer. 4 days later, he sent a memo to his field offices and told them to end any joint investigations they had with the Air Force regarding UFOs. Number 11. UFOs 2. Even so, from 1947 to 1953, you can find a trove of documents relating to UFO sightings in the USA. There are reports of flying discs, flying saucers, and in one July 11, 1947 report, a case of a woman in Twin Falls, Idaho, who said she saw a saucer with a saucer in the manner of symbols. This contraption, which was said to have been handed to the police, had a dome on top. The FBI report noted this might not have been a prank, although it certainly sounded like one. Pranking was a dangerous business, given that Hoover and the CIA would sometimes surveil UFO organizations and UFO enthusiasts in the possibility they were subversive elements. Number 10. Torture training. In Latin America under Operation Condor, the CIA sponsored state terrorism, and its infamous torture manuals played a part. Trade unionists, journalists, writers, artists, and even regular citizens suspected of being left-wing activists were tortured and sometimes disappeared. That is some dark stuff, but we usually don't associate the FBI with such torture. Even so, declassified files showed that the FBI did at times follow the CIA's KUBARK counterintelligence interrogation methods. After the manual was declassified in 1997, we learned that what the American Civil Liberties Union called a gruesome torture program was, at times, indeed used by the FBI. Now let's look at how torture was implemented. Number 9. Torture practice. As you know, during the War on Terror, men called high-value detainees were treated to controversial enhanced interrogation techniques. The Guardian talked about an alleged terrorist named Abu Zubaydah, who was arrested by the FBI, CIA, and Pakistani cops in 2002. He is still detained, yet has never been charged. He's kind of famous for the torture that happened to him, something he took to the European Court of Human Rights in 2014, and was awarded damages that his lawyer said he donated to torture victims. The FBI took part in some of that torture, which included being kept in a coffin for 11 days, beaten against walls, hung by his hands for days on end, waterboarded 83 times, kept in stress positions, and sleep-deprived. He got what the British called the full Monty at black sites, not just in Poland but in Thailand, Afghanistan, and Northern Africa. Number 8. Torture in Thailand. Thailand has a pretty bad track record where torture is concerned, which makes it the ideal place to have a black site. Human Rights Watch said the cops in one province of Thailand tortured youths, in some cases crushed their testicles, and then buried them after hanging them. This was when Thailand had its notorious uptick in the war on drugs in 2003. The cops were accused of abducting and killing at least 24 people in just one province, Kalasin. It was completely illegal, of course, but it also made Thailand a good place for the CIA to have black sites. The CIA has had secret sites in Thailand for decades. How this ties to the FBI is we now know some FBI agents were sent to that black site in Thailand during the War on Terror. The New York Times reported about this, saying the FBI usually has a strong moral compass. It gave the example of FBI agents not liking what they saw at those Thai black sites, saying its agents, disgusted with the violence they saw at a secret CIA prison in Thailand, walked out. The same article said 9 FBI agents worked for the CIA in Thailand. While on the record as being FBI, they were accused of torture and ended up in the courts. The public only found out about them in 2021 when the FBI declassified the relevant files. Number 7. JFK again. In 2022, after more JFK files were declassified, it was reported that the first recorded conversation between Hoover and President Lyndon Johnson was mysteriously erased. One of the memos sent by Hoover dated November 24, 1963, stated, "The thing that I am concerned about, and so is Mr. Katzenbach, Deputy Attorney General Nicholas Katzenbach, is having something issued so we can convince the public that Oswald is the real criminal." Number 6. Fake news. You might have heard about a man who is sometimes said to be one of the most influential Americans of the 20th century. His name was Henry Luce, and he was the founder of Time Magazine, Life Magazine, Fortune, and Sports Illustrated. He was also a friend of Allen Dulles, who with Luce helped to shape the public's opinion of the world affairs during Dulles' time at the CIA. The U.S. media watchdog FAIR wrote, "After the formation of the Central Intelligence Agency in 1947, Luce, a close friend of U.S. spy master Allen Dulles, privately urged his correspondents to cooperate with the agency." Luce also joined Dulles on the board of directors of the National Committee for a Free Europe, a CIA front that was said to sometimes send money to neo-Nazi organizations to control leftist movements in Europe. We now know that many American journalists during the Cold War were paid CIA operatives. The New York Times said at least 12 worked for newspapers abroad, shaping narratives there. Rolling Stone said in the 1970s, at least 400 U.S. journalists had secretly carried out assignments for the CIA, with news organizations including the New York Times, Time, Life, ABC, CBS News, Newsweek, the New York Herald Tribune, and the Associated Press. But the FBI also had assets in the media when it was trying to discredit certain individuals during its COINTELPRO program. It would leak information to friendly journalists who would print these stories without many questions. Declassified FBI documents show how agents were directed to use established local news media contacts. The Church Committee said these fake news stories were to wage a secret war in those citizens it considers threats to the established order. We also now know the FBI secretly investigated the Pentagon Papers journalist Ben Bagdikian. They looked at his credit card purchases, communications, and travel plans, and they used fake IDs to interview his friends and neighbors while trying to get the dirt on him and find out where he'd got the leaks. They also found his employment data and his immigration file. In one memo, the FBI HQ told its field offices to investigate all newspapers that had published anything on the leaks. The FBI liked leaking certain information, but the Pentagon Papers were not the kinds of leaks the agency supported. The leaker was Daniel Ellsberg, who was also subjected to a smear campaign. A freedom of press advocate said recently, "The fact that this happened over 45 years ago and we're just finding out about it now makes you wonder how many other times the government went to this length to spy on journalists in secret." The worrying question is, do such smear campaigns still exist? Number 5. Starting a fight. In 1969, as part of COINTELPRO, the FBI sent an anonymous letter to the leader of a Chicago street gang that went by the name of the Blackstone Rangers. While they were allied with the Black Panthers, the FBI had told the gang leader that Fred Hampton, the guy who you now know the FBI later killed, had taken a contract out on his life. In a memo, an FBI official said this should get the Blackstone Rangers in a fight with the Panthers. He remarked how the Rangers were willing to use extreme violence. That same year, in another memo, the FBI said its tactics were working, writing shootings, beatings, and a high degree of unrest continues to prevail in the ghetto area of southeast San Diego. A substantial amount of unrest is directly attributable to this program. So much for keeping the peace on the streets. Number 4. Starting a fight. 2. Also as part of COINTELPRO, the FBI tried to get the Mafia into a deadly fight with the Communists. In a memo dated July 31, 1977, the FBI said it had an operation that involved setting the La Cosa Nostra against the Communists and vice versa. It was called Operation Hoodwink. In another memo, the FBI admitted that neither side seemed interested in getting into a bloody battle after 2 years of trying. They even wrote letters to newspapers from apparent workers who supported labor unions. One such letter was from a man calling himself The Worker. He was mightily upset, he said, about the Mafia and its loan sharks extorting money from innocent victims while going about their other nefarious activities. This was supposed to get the two groups into a firefight, taking each other out and saving the FBI the effort. The sharks, it seems, didn't bite. There were more letters. One consists of a man saying his communist brother-in-law, who'd just been to Russia, was coming home to get rid of the hoodlums in the unions. They also sent letters to the 3 top Mafia leaders from apparently a communist who was blaming them for bombing the communist HQ. But as we said, the plan didn't work. Mobsters versus commies didn't happen. Number 3. The bad informants. One of the most embarrassing moments for the FBI was when it came out that one of their informants was a serial killer. He was Scott Kimball, who murdered at least 4 people in the early 2000s. The FBI had used him after he was caught in various fraud activities, but the information he gave agents was almost always untrue. He also used his cover to commit murders. It's hard to say how many informants the FBI has all over the U.S., but it's generally reported to be about 15,000. According to a report, it was only 1,500 in 1975. Forbes wrote in 2015, FBI and other agencies paid informants $548 million in recent years, with many committing authorized crimes. The same report said that, according to a Freedom of Information request, there were 22,800 crime authorizations given by the FBI from 2011 to 2014, meaning that people were authorized to commit crimes. The agency explained, "It's not that we're ignoring these crimes, it's that we're letting the informant engage in the criminal activity for the purpose of furthering our investigation. These are not major crimes, it seems, but informants have used their protection to get away with terrible deeds, such as the mass murderer Philip Arthur Thompson." According to a recent Netflix true crime documentary series, American Conspiracy: The Octopus Murders, a crazy documentary, Thompson was a sadistic man involved with heinous crimes for many years. But no matter how horrifically violent his crimes were, he had a knack of staying out of prison. We'll say no more about that documentary, lest we end up having an accident. Now, to be fair to the FBI, without informants, the job is almost impossible. And let's remember, the job mostly entails keeping people safe. Today's show is mostly about the hidden bad stuff. Number 2. The FBI spy. One of the most infamous spies the U.S. has ever had worked for the FBI. His name was Robert Hanssen. He started working for the FBI in 1976. Unbeknownst to anyone, he started passing information to the Soviets in 1979. Over the years, he told the Russians about a multi-million-dollar eavesdropping tunnel under the Soviet embassy in Washington, D.C. Despite the high cost of the tunnel, the Americans barely got anything useful. Little did they know that Hanssen had told the Russians about it. He was paid about $130,000 in today's money for that information. He gave the Russians information about the U.S. nuclear program. He told them about American spies, which led to the arrest and imprisonment of 3 U.S. sources. 2 more Americans were executed because of his spying. It's thought he was paid $1.4 million, $600,000 cash and diamonds, and about $800,000 right into one of his bank accounts. It cost the FBI another $7 million to get information from a KGB agent that would lead to them catching Hanssen. Today, after being called the most traitorous actions imaginable against a country governed by the rule of law, he is 79 and wallowing away in a high-security prison. Number 1. Undercover. One of the most frightening jobs in the world is that of an undercover agent who has infiltrated an organization. The name Joe Pistone springs to mind. He was the FBI agent who, from 1976 to 1981, pretended to be a criminal named Donnie Brasco as he infiltrated the mob. His work led to around 100 convictions, not to mention the murders that took place when he left his mafia in chaos. Over the years, FBI agents have infiltrated neo-Nazi groups. They've had people in environmental activist outfits and feminist organizations. And they recently put a pink-haired woman who said her name was Chelsea into a racial justice group. While we guess most people, for the right amount of money, wouldn't mind risking the racial justice group finding out who they were, you certainly wouldn't want to get on the wrong side of drug gangs. It's happened. Agent Charles Leo Reed was buying cocaine from a surveilled drug dealer in Philadelphia in 1996 when he was shot dead. At the time, his name wasn't published in the news stories, since undercover agents are always kept very secret, even within the FBI. Fortunately, undercover agents are not killed very often. The Washington Post said in 2023 that Reed was the last undercover agent to be killed on the job. Infiltrating drug gangs is a risky business and not something the FBI would do without giving it a lot of thought. But agents do pose as other kinds of criminals. We'll finish this video with a recent story of a fake FBI website selling murder for hire. A man got in touch with the site and wrote an application for a hitman, not knowing he was talking to an agent. He was good at killing, he said, since he had been a soldier. He wrote, "I'm looking for a job that pays well and is related to my military experience, shooting and killing the marked target, so I can support my kid on the way. What can I say? I enjoy doing what I do. So if I can find a job that is similar to it, such as this one, put me in, coach." He was hired. The agent later met him in a park and gave him the target package, with photographs, the name, address, and other information about the guy he was supposed to take out. He also got $2,500. Later that day, he was arrested. Is the Pentagon haunted? Are there really aliens out there that the government is keeping secret from us? How did a gaming Discord server called Thug Shaker Central undermine national security? Wrap a tinfoil hat on tight as we delve into 50 of the most insane declassified secrets that the public was never meant to learn. Number 50. The Pentagon does indeed have its very own UFO monitoring program. The Advanced Aerospace Threat Identification Program has long been a closely guarded secret and never once formally acknowledged by the Department of Defense. Many have still long suspected that the agency must have some form of dedicated special division that investigates reports of unidentified flying objects. But the Pentagon even went as far as to claim back in 2012 that such a program, if it even existed, hadn't been receiving any funding. That is, until July 15, 2022, when the existence of the All-Domain Anomaly Resolution Office was announced to the public. The official function of this office was to collect and analyze reports of what the Department of Defense referred to as unidentified aerial phenomena or unidentified anomalous phenomena, better known as UAP. It's possible that this acronym was established to distance from the previously popular term UFOs, given that it had been long synonymous with aliens or alien technology. The All-Domain Anomaly Resolution Office reports that they have found no evidence of either, but they have openly admitted that there are some incidents they've looked into that they still can't quite explain. Number 49. Sticking with UFOs, back in November of 2004, David Fravor, commander aboard the aircraft carrier the USS Nimitz, had his crew investigate a possible target that had appeared on the ship's radar. What he and his men witnessed was an unusual aircraft that looked like a large white oval. Fighter jets were sent up to investigate and even captured video of the object on their infrared cameras. There were even similar incidents that took place during 2014 and 2015, where pilots from the USS Theodore Roosevelt carrier encountered and were able to record objects that they couldn't identify. These videos of what have since been referred to as the Nimitz UFO encounters are astonishing to those who believe in the existence of aliens. However, many have speculated that there could be much more to those incidents. Adding fuel to the fire, direct witnesses have claimed that there is a longer video that still has not been released by the Navy that apparently depicts the unidentified white object performing a number of aerial maneuvers thought to be physically impossible. Give us the aliens, Pentagon! Number 48. As if the existence of these Navy UFO videos weren't enough of a shocking secret that the Pentagon kept under wraps, it also has been revealed that these clips were never supposed to be released to the public in the first place. The clips documenting supposed UFO activity were leaked, along with the context that they had been captured by U.S. Navy fighter pilots. The Department of Defense was forced to admit that they had never intended the public to see the footage. Number 47. But forget about aliens, sometimes domestic terrorists are the biggest threat to the Pentagon. In 1972, a far-left Marxist group called Weather Underground conducted a bombing campaign across the United States, specifically targeting government buildings. They placed a bomb in a woman's bathroom in the Pentagon, which caused some structural damage but thankfully didn't result in any casualties. Number 46. The Pentagon has some pretty insane inventions, including military chewing gum. The so-called combat gum is being developed to help meet the dental needs of soldiers early and potentially save the Army $100 million a year on addressing dental issues for service members. The gum contains a secret synthetic sequence of antimicrobial peptides that'll break down the plaque that causes tooth decay in the mouths of soldiers. And if it goes well, we might find this handy dental gum hitting the shelves for general consumers someday in the future, as is often the case with military tech. Number 45. Did you know that protesters tried to magically levitate the Pentagon? The disastrous Vietnam War did not succeed in making the U.S. government particularly popular, domestically or on the international stage. One group of protesters marched on the Pentagon with a plan to levitate it through the power of chance and exorcise it of its evil, thus ending the Vietnam War. This didn't actually work, of course, but it succeeded in getting a lot of attention to the issue, which is a victory in itself. Number 44. The Pentagon helps movies that paint the military in a positive light. Movies like The Sum of All Fears, Battleship, the Top Gun movies, and many of the films from the Marvel Cinematic Universe were given both financial assistance and access to resources and technology from the U.S. military. Some movies that paint the armed forces in a more critical light are likely to be denied assistance from the Pentagon, including anti-war movies like The Deer Hunter and Platoon. Number 43. In the early 1990s, the Pentagon had a pretty horrific pest problem. In an act of infiltration that enemy spies wished they could pull off, during the Gulf War, the Pentagon became a haven for rats and cockroaches. For workers in the basement, there were so many roaches they'd occasionally fall from the ceiling onto the employee desks. 1991 saw hundreds of reports of rats running through the halls, getting to a point where they were seeing as many as 5 rat incidents a week in food service areas. John Rebstock, the general manager of the company that provided food services for the Pentagon, once sent out a memo saying, "My message is simple. Help is needed and requested. The level of infestation has become unacceptable. Gross." Number 42. The Pentagon might have alien vehicles. One astrophysicist named Eric Davis was consulted for the Pentagon's UFO program and claims to have personally examined numerous examples of what he believed to be off-world vehicles. Number 41. Speaking of secretive vehicles, it turns out the U.S. Air Force built a fighter jet that nobody knew about. In 2020, an official surprise announcement was made to the public regarding a jet that had been designed, built, and tested all in secret by the Next Generation Air Dominance program. No other information about the fighter jet has been released and likely won't be until this secret project begins deployment. Number 40. The U.S. military once funded their very own flying saucer program. Starting back in the 50s, the program was titled Project 1794, tasked with designing the U.S. military's very own flying saucers. In other words, a supersonic aircraft to combat Soviet bombers. Number 39. The military has attempted to harness the power of Zeus himself and turn lightning into a weapon. Declassified documents from 1967 indicate that a functional weapon was indeed created for this purpose that couldn't be traced back to the wielder. However, the CIA supposedly never fulfilled the program. But never give up on your dreams, because the U.S. Army has since been working on the much more successful 50 billion watt laser-induced plasma channel, which zaps conductive targets with awesome accuracy. Number 38. The Air Force is keeping a secret Russian anti-aircraft missile off the books. In June 2020, the intelligence community acquired a Pantsir S-1 from Libyan forces. This is Russia's most advanced anti-aircraft missile, designed for low-altitude air defense, most recently deployed in war zones both in Syria and Libya. At present, there's no official word on where this missile is. Number 37. One of the Pentagon's most dangerous locations may have been a hot dog stand. According to the Department of Defense Communications Officer Brent Eaton, there were rumors that during the Cold War, the Soviets had 2 nuclear missiles aimed at the hot dog stand in the case of an all-out war. Why? Well, according to Eaton, they thought this was the Pentagon's most top-secret meeting room, and the entire Pentagon was a large fortress built around this hot dog stand. They thought the officers were going to get their top-secret briefings in a protected area, but really they were just going to get lunch. Number 36. In the 90s, a pair of naval officers discovered an inexplicable dark mass beneath the surface of the ocean, and it wasn't a submarine. Assigned to retrieve BQM aerial target drones and submarine torpedoes from the ocean, a commander and helicopter pilot recalled seeing a large, shadowy, circular object try to swallow a torpedo that they were attempting to recover. There were 2 different alleged sightings of the bizarre black mass, and there is still no definitive explanation. Number 35. During the Cold War, the government ran a now declassified training program known as the Constant Peg program. This trained U.S. pilots to fly MiGs, fighter jets that had formerly belonged to the Soviet Union. The government secretly procured these aircraft so that the best pilots in the Air Force could become better familiarized with the enemy technology and how to fight against the MiGs if World War III broke out. Number 34. In World War II, the Army smuggled secret escape plans in an unlikely place. Allied forces troops being detained as prisoners of war were snuck out of POW camps thanks to detailed escape routes that were hidden within decks of cards, thanks to the Geneva Convention stating that prisoners of war could receive care packages at Christmas. These decks of cards were smuggled undetected into camps and allowed the captive Allied soldiers to escape. Number 33. A Pentagon renovation project saved hundreds of lives on 9/11. As part of the 9/11 terrorist attacks, American Airlines Flight 77 crashed into the Pentagon, killing 189 people. However, the Pentagon was undergoing major renovations at the time, meaning that fewer employees than usual were on site. The plane also hit Wedge 3 of the Pentagon, which had been freshly renovated and was fitted with a new sprinkler system and blast-resistant windows, in addition to extra structural support. Had the attack happened even a year earlier, the casualties likely would have been far more severe. Number 32. The Air Force has been launching unmanned space planes into orbit since 2010. Designated the X-37B Orbital Test Vehicle 5, these have been deployed on 5 missions to run classified tests. The last of these saw the craft spend a record-breaking 780 days in orbit. Number 31. The Pentagon building has a pretty amazing food court. You probably don't associate the serious work of the Department of Defense with junk food binges, and yet the building has a Baskin-Robbins, a Dunkin' Donuts, a Taco Bell, a Burger King, a Popeyes, a KFC, a Subway, a Panda Express, and a Starbucks. So we know the DoD workers won't get hungry. But if you're worried about them getting heart attacks from that diet plus all the stress of protecting America's national security, don't worry, the place also has a pretty amazing gym. Not to mention an optometrist, a CVS, a clothes store, and a jewelry store, as well as a florist. Number 30. Area 51 gave us one of the best recon planes of the 20th century. In 1963, the A-12 Oxcart was developed for reconnaissance missions at high altitudes and any that required evasive maneuvers. Throughout the design, construction, and testing phases of the A-12 project, the aircraft was located at none other than the infamous Area 51 Air Force Base in Nevada, meaning the A-12 likely would have been tested there too. It was considered the best reconnaissance aircraft at the U.S.'s disposal until the SR-71 took its place in 1968. Number 29. The Air Force hasn't just conducted secret projects on Earth. While NASA was receiving a lot of news coverage in the 60s thanks to the space race, the Air Force was conducting their own secret space program. The Manned Orbiting Laboratory was a top-secret satellite that was intended to spy on the Soviet Union. Officially, there was never a launch associated with the project, and it was supposedly shut down in 1969. However, thanks to declassified documents, we now know the government planned to keep an orbital eye in the sky trained on the Soviet Union. Number 28. The Pentagon was actually the first integrated building in Virginia. Due to the laws of segregation, when the Pentagon was first built, there were separate facilities for the black and white government employees on site. However, after a violent confrontation where a white employee struck a black employee on the head for trying to enter a whites-only cafeteria, President Roosevelt decided something needed to change. He made an executive order forbidding racial segregation and discrimination in federal facilities, making the Pentagon the only building in Virginia that was desegregated. To this day, because of the Pentagon's segregationist past, it has twice as many bathrooms as it needs. Number 27. Donald Trump accidentally tweeted Pentagon secrets. Of the several thousand satellites orbiting around Earth, hundreds of them are owned and operated by the United States military. This might not be a secret since the public has been aware of the presence of these satellites for years. However, their actual capabilities have remained unknown. That is, until former President Donald Trump released a classified image on his Twitter of all places. In September of 2019, an image of one of the United States' KH-11 reconnaissance satellites appeared online. For obvious reasons, there is not a lot of known information about these satellites. Number 26. Project Blue Book was the third of the U.S. Air Force's UFO programs. By 1952, the previous program had deemed that 23% of all UFO cases were inexplicable, so Project Blue Book was initiated in order to debunk these earlier inquiries. The Air Force might have discontinued the program in 1969, but the government has since continued to record supposed UFO encounters. Number 25. The Pentagon is much bigger than you think. While the building is surprisingly short for its massive importance to the U.S. government, its design documents dictated that it be no taller than 5 stories, with 2 stories below ground. It covers 6.5 million square feet of office space, which is 3 times the floor space of the Empire State Building. There are almost 18 miles of corridors, but because of its unique design, it only takes 7 minutes to walk between the building's 2 furthest points. Number 24. Ever wondered why the Pentagon is, well, a pentagon? The initial place where the Pentagon was going to be built was a plot of land just east of Arlington Cemetery in Virginia, which had once been owned by Robert E. Lee. The area now belonged to the Department of Agriculture, which was running Arlington Farms. This created an issue for the Department of Defense, as access roads to the farms ran over the land where the Pentagon was going to be built. To accommodate the access roads, the building had to be designed in a strange, irregular, pentagonal shape. When the building site was moved, it was too late to alter the plans, so the edges were made regular and the Pentagon we know today was constructed. Number 23. Did you know that during the Manhattan Project to develop nuclear weapons, Russian spies were able to leak information about the atomic bomb back to the Soviet Union? According to declassified documents, a man named Oscar Sieberer, who was working at the Los Alamos National Laboratory during the 1940s, was leaking information to the Soviets about the United States' development of nuclear bombs. Although Sieberer was most likely first identified in 1956, his identity wasn't made public until much later. Number 22. Are there actually aliens in Area 51? Contrary to popular belief and in a reveal that is likely to break the hearts of extraterrestrial-obsessed stargazers everywhere, there really aren't any aliens at Area 51. The infamous heavily guarded base serves as a test site for classified aircraft, communications devices, and weaponry, and doesn't actually house any alien bodies that we know of. Never stop dreaming, X-Files fans. Number 21. Did you know the Department of Defense is looking into ways to control people's sleep? A research project is currently investigating ways to control rapid eye movement or REM sleep, reportedly with the goal of easing stress and helping subjects deal with traumatic memories. Number 20. A Discord group called Thug Shaker Central leaked state secrets from the Pentagon. A 21-year-old member of the Massachusetts Air National Guard named Jack Tesaria was arrested by the FBI in April 2023 for stealing and releasing extremely sensitive military documents to the largely underaged members of his gaming Discord server, causing them to be leaked to 4chan. These next few facts will be Pentagon secrets we found from those leaked documents concerning the war in Ukraine. Number 19. The head of the Wagner Group, a Russian state-funded private military company, offered to reveal Russian troop locations to Ukrainian forces. Prior to his death in August 2023, Yevgeny Prigozhin had offered to hand over Russian intel regarding the positions of their soldiers' locations to Ukraine. This was under the provision that they withdrew their forces from Bakhmut, where the Wagner Group had been taking heavy losses. According to intelligence documents that were leaked, Prigozhin, who had long been an ally of Vladimir Putin and even publicly attempted to have the Wagner Group halt Russia's invasion, maintained a secret relationship with Ukrainian intelligence through various phone calls and in-person meetings. Number 18. More Pentagon documents indicated that Ukraine had planned a series of secret attacks against Russian forces in Syria. Although their plans were later abandoned, Ukraine had intended to conduct strikes against Russian troops inside Syria that they could later deny any involvement in. The plan initially included providing arms and training to Kurdish Syrian Democratic Forces, then having them launch drone strikes to target Wagner Group mercenaries backed by Russia. President Zelensky ultimately put a stop to these plans in December 2023, but the Pentagon's leaked documents suggest that this strategy could still be revived. Number 17. According to another of the leaked documents, the U.S. attempted to dissuade Ukraine from defending the city of Bakhmut against the Russian advance. However, Ukraine disregarded this and protected Bakhmut anyway. Number 16. When several Chinese spy balloons flew across the U.S. before being shot down, it turned out that the Pentagon was well aware of the capabilities of these devices. Among the recently leaked documents were annotated images taken by a spy plane describing what these balloons were equipped with. Called a Killeen-23 by intelligence agencies, these balloons apparently included sensors and antennas that the U.S. government couldn't identify even a week after they'd had the balloons shot down. Number 15. The Pentagon's documents also indicate that the U.S. has intelligence operatives deep within most of Russia's security services, intelligence agencies, and the higher levels of the military command. Through this, they've granted the U.S. an insight into the internal plans of Russia's military intelligence agency, the GRU, and obtained intelligence relating to their military capabilities and plans for the war in Ukraine. It's likely that the U.S. has passed a lot of this information to Kyiv in order to support Ukraine against the invasion. Number 14. One such piece of intelligence the Pentagon has acquired was that the Spetsnaz, Russia's elite special forces, have suffered such heavy losses in Ukraine that it may take a decade to build their numbers back up again. Typically, the highly trained Spetsnaz operatives are sent on riskier missions, but senior commanders in the Russian military seem to have been too eager to deploy their elite forces and have misused them in the invasion. According to the Pentagon's intelligence, the high number of Spetsnaz casualties could make Russia's special forces less effective, not just in Ukraine but across the world. Number 13. It's not just Russia that the U.S. has been spying on either. The Pentagon has been gathering intelligence on their allies. This includes monitoring the communications of Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky. This is apparently how they've learned a lot about Ukraine's attempts to repel the Russian invasion. And when this information leaked, Ukrainian officials were outraged as it forced them to make changes to their plans. Number 12. The Pentagon's intelligence also expressed doubt that Ukraine can retake the territory that is now occupied by Russian forces, owing to a lack of equipment, ammunition, and troops. Their leaked documents also suggested that a difference in levels of training between the two armies could result in heavy human casualties. Number 11. One of the reports leaked from the Pentagon indicated that the Wagner Group attempted to secure weapons from Turkey through Mali. They uncovered that Mali's interim president had confirmed that they would purchase arms from Turkey on behalf of the mercenary group. Turkey declined to comment on the allegation, but it could mean that this NATO country was covertly supplying weapons to both sides involved in the conflict in Ukraine. Number 10. Another similar secret about arms being sent between countries came up in plans from Egypt's president to deliver rockets to Russia. A Pentagon report suggested that Abdel Fattah el-Sisi had ordered a shipment of 40,000 rockets to be sent to Russia. Egypt has long been an ally of the US and publicly maintained a policy of non-involvement in the war in Ukraine. Assuming the intelligence was accurate, Egypt has reaffirmed its non-involvement, and there's no evidence that the plan had been carried out. Number 9. In a move that could have added to the tension caused by their invasion, Russian forces almost shot down a UK surveillance plane near Ukraine. The leaked Pentagon documents reported that a pair of Russian Su-27 fighter jets intercepted a British RC-135 reconnaissance plane flying in international airspace over the Black Sea. One fired a missile from a distance, but a Russian defense official claimed that this was owing to a technical malfunction. Number 8. One of the leaked documents also contained a worrying claim from Russian intelligence officers that the United Arab Emirates had agreed to work together with Russia against the US and the UK. There wasn't any clear record of such an agreement, and these claims could have been intentionally or unintentionally misleading, if not outright false. Number 7. The Pentagon is also aware that Russian hackers may have gained access to the natural gas infrastructure of Canada. U.S. intelligence agencies have intercepted communications between a pro-Russian hacking group, Zarya, and officers with Russia's FSB security service. The hackers claim to have breached a Canadian gas facility and gained access to its control systems that would give them the ability to increase valve pressure, disable alarms, and initiate an emergency shutdown. The Pentagon's reporting stated that FSB officers had instructed the hacker group to maintain access and await further instructions, but there was no evidence that any natural gas pipeline company in Canada has suffered from a cyber attack. Number 6. It turns out that even one of Russia's allies, Serbia, has disapproved of the invasion and even agreed to send arms to Ukraine as a result. Despite refusing to levy any sanctions against Russia, Serbia may have sent weapons to Kyiv. The country's defense minister outright denied that the Serbian government has been responsible for supplying lethal aid to Ukraine. However, a classified Pentagon document that was leaked seemed to suggest otherwise. Number 5. The Pentagon learned that the Wagner Group mercenaries were reportedly looking into alternative employment after all the casualties they suffered by aiding Russia. The group was apparently planning to discreetly take contracts from the government of Haiti to help the national police fight against gangs. Number 4. According to communications that the U.S. had intercepted, Nicaragua had been strengthening ties with China since its primary security ally, Russia, became entangled in its invasion of Ukraine. The Pentagon seemed to think that Nicaragua would still remain allied with Russia, but it might consider offering the Chinese Navy access to its ports in exchange for economic investment. Number 3. It's not just Russian and Ukrainian fighters on the ground either. As many as 50 British special forces were present in Ukraine, along with US and French special forces as well. One leaked Pentagon document listed the number of outside special forces that were operating within the country, with as many as 97 from NATO countries active in Ukraine. While the UK declined to comment in an official capacity, and France has denied all claims of their soldiers being in Ukraine, apparently a team of US Special Forces operatives were confirmed to have been operating out of the American embassy in Kyiv. However, they are not active on the front lines alongside Ukrainian troops. Number 2. The recent Thug Shaker Central leaks aren't even the only embarrassing dissemination of Pentagon secrets to the public. A senior research associate at MIT's Center for International Studies, Daniel Ellsberg, gave the New York Times around 4,000 pages of appended top-secret documents that detail the U.S.'s interference in various wars in Vietnam, Laos, and Cambodia. The Pentagon papers revealed that the U.S. actions during the Vietnam War involved far more attacks than had been previously reported on by the mainstream media, and that various presidential administrations had been systematically lying to both public and Congress. Number 1. Did you know there's a secret apartment above the Pentagon? During the building's construction, one of the key figures involved, Major Robert Furman, was required to be on site at all hours of the day. So Furman had some of the construction contractors build him a secret apartment situated between the walls of what would later become the Army's Ordnance Division. Employees began to refer to Furman as a ghost, since he'd disappear without a trace, only to re-emerge the next day, all without leaving the Pentagon. And it seemed that this ghost was just heading to a place he could rest. Major Furman later served as an intelligence officer on the Manhattan Project, the government program that researched the development of nuclear weapons. He continued to use his secret Pentagon apartment whenever traveling back to Washington, until ordnance officers discovered it and forced him out. Those were 50 of the craziest declassified Pentagon secrets that we could find. And if those are just the things we know about, it makes you wonder what else could be out there. Secret mind control experiments in brothels, weaponized sex dolls, and even CIA magicians. These are some of the weirdest things you never knew about the United States Central Intelligence Agency. Fact 1. Did you know that the CIA built an untraceable heart attack gun? While it seems more like something from a James Bond movie, this really was a weapon used by the CIA. It was a pistol capable of firing a frozen dart full of deadly shellfish toxin. The dart would pierce the skin and then melt in the body, distributing the poison and inducing a heart attack shortly after, with no way of tracing the murder back to the assassin. It was one of the many reasons Senator Frank Church cited in 1975 as to why the CIA needed greater government oversight. Fact 2. What's the favored sidearm for a CIA agent? Seeing as Senator Church slammed the brakes on the old heart attack gun, it never became standard issue. The general consensus is the Glock 19 and Sig Sauer P226 are the most popular pistols among the CIA's ranks. Simple but effective. Fact 3. Some of the strangest CIA agents were literal house cats. We're talking about one of the CIA's greatest embarrassments, the Acoustic Kitty Project. This $20 million 1960s failure was a plan intended to turn cats into living listening devices to infiltrate the Kremlin by implanting tiny microphones into their ear canals and a radio transmitter in the base of their skulls. The plan failed because, well, as cat owners know, they don't take direction well. Fact 4. If cat recorders don't work, what about pigeon cameras? The CIA's Research and Development Division created tiny cameras and lights to be placed into trained pigeons during the Cold War, owing to pigeons' uncanny abilities to always find their way home. No prizes for guessing that this went a lot better than the plot with the cats. Fact 5. Argo actually happened. The Oscar-winning Ben Affleck movie was actually pretty accurate in its telling of the incredible plot to rescue 6 American citizens from a politically unstable Tehran in 1979. The CIA created its own fake movie studio, Studio 6 Productions, and a fake science fiction movie as a pretense to sneak into the country and liberate the trapped Americans. We hope you enjoyed the whimsy of that, because it's all going to get darker from here. Fact 6. The CIA tortured an innocent man because of a typo. Back in 2003, Khalid el-Masri was arrested in Macedonia and then given to the CIA on the suspicion that he was involved in the 9/11 terrorist attacks. He endured a living hell in 2 different brutal CIA detention sites where he was beaten, tortured over the course of several months. Why? Because Khalid el-Masri had a very similar name to Khalid al-Masri and was detained after one of history's most unfortunate cases of mistaken identity. The subsequent court battle in the European Court of Human Rights marks the first time that the activities of the CIA have been legally declared torture. Fact 7. Did you know there is a hyper-secretive CIA Starbucks? Because even secret agents need caffeine, the so-called stealthy Starbucks in the CIA headquarters in Langley, Virginia, has special rules for serving its unique clientele. They need to put the baristas through intense background checks to make sure none of them is an enemy agent eavesdropping on state secrets. This is also the only Starbucks where they do not do reward cards or write names on the cups, given some agents may not be at liberty to share that information. Fact 8. Did you know the CIA had an arms dealer on their payroll? Edwin Wilson was arrested in 1983 for selling 20 tons of plastic explosives to Libya in what was at the time the biggest illegal weapons deal in recorded history. Wilson had retired from the CIA officially in 1971, and when the deal came to light, the CIA washed its hands of him. However, Edwin worked tirelessly to reveal that he'd still been working as a contractor, obtaining information and running front businesses for the intelligence agency during the time he was arrested. While he was never directly asked to make a deal with Libya, it may have still fallen under the purview of information-gathering activities. He was released in prison in 2003 in light of this and was quoted saying, "I was doing it for them. If they hadn't walked away from me, I wouldn't have ever been convicted." Fact 9. Did you know the CIA made edits to Zero Dark 30? A declassified memo shows the agency had influence over the 2012 biopic about the hunt for Osama bin Laden. They wanted to make sure they were presented in a positive light by demanding changes such as making the protagonist an observer rather than a participant in a waterboarding scene, removing a scene where vicious dogs are used to interrogate a prisoner, and also excising a scene where agents party with AK-47s on a rooftop. Fact 10. The CIA also cut references to torture in Meet the Parents. In this forgettable franchise-spawning 2000s comedy, Ben Stiller finds out his future father-in-law, played by Robert De Niro, is a hard-ass ex-CIA special agent. In the original draft of the movie, this is discovered when Stiller's character finds a torture manual in De Niro's personal effects. The CIA made them cut this from the movie and instead replaced it with Stiller finding a series of pictures showing De Niro with several famous politicians. Shame. The CIA could have earned some positive PR just by cutting the entire movie. Fact 11. It isn't just movies. The CIA has been caught editing Wikipedia. In what might have been a violation of the website's conflict of interest rules, CIA computers were found to have been making alterations to articles about the Iraq War, Guantanamo Bay, and the profiles of former agents, among other diverse topics. Some of the most concerning edits have involved removing certain pictures from the Guantanamo article and muddying the waters of death statistics in previous conflicts in which they were involved. That's a little shady there, guys. Fact 12. They teamed up with people from Hasbro to make a demonic Bin Laden action figure. No, this isn't a rejected plotline from American Dad. It was part of a 2005-2006 PSYOP campaign known as Devil Eyes, where they worked with former Hasbro exec Donald Levine, one of the major architects of the G.I. Joe toy franchise, to make and distribute action figures of Osama bin Laden among South Asian youth, particularly in Afghanistan and Pakistan. But like all the best action figures, it came with a twist. Over time, the face of the action figure would peel away and reveal a demonic stare underneath, which the CIA hoped would make people change their minds about supporting Al-Qaeda. Opinions are split on whether more than 3 prototypes were ever made, but we can probably all agree that a demonic action figure likely would not have brought a powerful terrorist group to its knees. Sorry, Mr. Levine. Fact 13. The CIA bribed some Afghan tribal chiefs with Viagra. In Taliban-controlled Afghanistan, the CIA needs to be careful with its choice of confidential informants, and even more careful about how they pay them. Monetary gifts often draw too much attention from the Taliban, and gifts of weapons often end up in the wrong hands. That's why the CIA has gotten more creative with the gifts they give to many warlords and tribal elders who give them a steady supply of information about the region. These have included toys, medicine, clothes, and yes, Viagra, which reignited the sex life of one older tribal patriarch. Good for him. Fact 14. The CIA tormented prisoners with Barney the Purple Dinosaur. In a process disturbingly described as torture light, Iraqi prisoners have been interrogated by the CIA by being locked in an enclosed room and being bombarded with a variety of songs at ear-splitting volumes, referred to by one prisoner as the disco. The playlist at this nightmarish disco includes, among others, Metallica's Enter Sandman, Queen's We Are the Champions, and I Love You by Barney the Purple Dinosaur. James Hetfield, Metallica's co-founder, didn't seem bothered by his music being used in torture. He said, "We've been punishing our parents, our wives, our loved ones with this music forever. Why should the Iraqis be any different?" We're still waiting on an official comment from Barney. Fact 15. The CIA tried to use the power of the mind to escape space-time. This consciousness-altering series of experiments was known as the Gateway Process, and it theorized in a highly simplified sense that certain kinds of audio stimulation could alter the mind. What kinds of effects would these alterations offer the CIA? Nothing much really, aside from gaining an intuitive knowledge of the universe and an ability to commune with extra-dimensional beings outside of space-time. Given the CIA doesn't, as far as we know, have agents like Glorbo the Immaculate from Dimension X on the payroll, this plan didn't bear much fruit. These days, it's just another form of viral hippie pseudoscience on TikTok. Fact 16. The CIA had the Dalai Lama on its payroll. This one was just a conspiracy theory for the longest time, until access to certain CIA intelligence bank accounts revealed that the CIA had been giving the Tibetan spiritual leader a generous $180,000 yearly stipend in the 1960s to help fan the flames of the Tibetan exodus and weaken China's potential for expansion during the Cold War. Maybe next we'll find out they really do have Glorbo the Immaculate. Fact 17. During the Cold War, the CIA and MI6 built a giant spy tunnel under Berlin. In one of the most ambitious espionage operations of all time, Operation Gold was an impressive sequel to Operation Silver in Vienna. The goal was to tap into Russian landline communications in Soviet-occupied Berlin by building a huge spy tunnel under the city, which took 8 months from its start date in 1954. But there's a twist. The Soviets knew about it the whole time, thanks to George Blake, a double agent in MI6. They kept their knowledge under wraps until 1956 to avoid exposing a valuable mole. Fact 18. The CIA figured out how to turn sex dolls into spy tools. During the 1970s, CIA spies in Moscow needed a quick distraction when they were being pursued by Soviet counterspies. One proposed idea was known as the Jack-in-the-Box, or the Jib, inspired by inflatable sex dolls. It would be a small device that upon the press of a button would essentially inflate a fake agent to momentarily confuse the pursuer. Get smart, eat your heart out. Fact 19. Time for a CIA versus Castro lightning round. There were over 600 unsuccessful attempts on the Cuban leader's life, and many of them were performed by the CIA. But don't worry, they had some very helpful advice from seasoned murderer professionals like mobsters Sam Giancarlo, Santos Traficant, and Carlos Marcello. They recommended that the CIA take out Castro with poisoned pills slipped into the ice cream of his favorite milkshake, because Sam, Santos, and Carlos seemed to be almost comically evil movie mobsters. Diabolical as it seemed, though, this attempt did not succeed in putting Castro out of commission. But none of the three mobsters would survive to the 2000s, so Castro had the last laugh. Fact 20. When poison ice cream failed, the CIA tried poison cigars. Some of Castro's favorite Cubans, the cigars, not the citizens, were spiked with botulinum toxin and delivered to an anonymous assassin in 1961, but it's unclear what happened after that, so it's very possible that a random innocent person or people ended up getting smoked by their smokes. Fact 21. The CIA also tried to kill Castro with an exploding seashell. Castro loved scuba diving, so in '63 the CIA floated the idea of finding and painting a particularly magnificent shell and planting it where Castro would dive. The plan was to implant an explosive into the shell and detonate it when El Comandante was in close proximity. Obviously, this didn't work. And it wasn't even the only scuba-related assassination attempt against Castro. The CIA also tried to bump Castro off, or at least horribly disfigure him, by giving him a diving suit and breathing apparatus infected with a deadly fungus. Fact 22. The CIA also tried to get one of Castro's lovers to kill him on their behalf. Marita Lorenz, who was involved with Castro in 1959, claims the CIA tried to make her a professional femme fatale, giving her some poisoned pills to sneak into Castro's drink. But the plan was another disaster. She stored the pills in a cold cream jar, rendering them unusable. Castro also figured out the plan and held Lorenz at gunpoint, saying, "You can't kill me. Nobody can kill me." Then they apparently made love, because that's just the kind of guy Castro was. Fact 23. When the CIA couldn't kill him, they settled for trying to make Castro look completely insane. When Castro was scheduled to give a speech to the Cuban people over the radio, the CIA hoped to dose him with LSD, which could cause severe hallucinations and make him give a bizarre and incoherent speech. This plan never came to fruition because the LSD compound they hoped to use proved to be too unstable. And believe us when we tell you, as you'll find out later in this video, this doesn't even break the top 20 most insane things the CIA has done with LSD. Fact 24. The CIA also tried to assassinate Castro's beard. In perhaps the greatest sign that the CIA was clutching at straws with some of these attempts, someone in the CIA Castro Assassination Brain Trust suggested dusting the man's shoes with thallium, a poison that would cause his iconic beard to fall out. Once again, the plan failed, and Castro took his mighty beard to the grave with him in 2016. Fact 25. The CIA may have gotten people killed with pizza. Specifically, we're talking about one of the most terrible code words of all time. Back in 2011, a group of CIA informants was rumbled by Hezbollah in Beirut after they used the code word pizza to describe a secret intelligence meeting at a Pizza Hut. While an anonymous U.S. official denies that the meeting happened in an actual Pizza Hut, retired CIA official Robert Baer was quoted as saying, "If they were genuine spies spying against Hezbollah, I don't think we'd ever see them again." Yikes. Fact 26. The CIA tried to weaponize a sex tape. We know that sex dolls were not out of the question for Cold War espionage, but both the CIA and the KGB wanted to use sex tapes as kompromat against extremely popular Indonesian president Sukarno. Some reports even allege that the CIA did this by using a performer in an incredibly realistic rubber Sukarno mask. This plot was a failure, however, and possibly for an extremely funny reason. Some reports indicate that Sukarno was strangely flattered by the sex tapes and asked the CIA and KGB to send him some copies. You can't blackmail a man who's immune to shame. Fact 27. The CIA was a patron of abstract art. During the early 1950s, the CIA pursued any angles of resistance against the Soviets that they could find, and one of these was promoting American ideals through art. To this end, the CIA helped fund gallery showings of abstract art from figures like Jackson Pollock and Willem de Kooning across the world. Their logic was that such art could never be produced under a communist state where free thought is suppressed, so by promoting this art, they were promoting the American ideal. We don't know if this actually achieved its intended purpose, but it's nice to know that at least some CIA money went to funding the arts rather than haphazard attempts to take on Cuba. Speaking of which, fact 28. The CIA had a plan to blame Cuba if America's space missions failed. In a subdivision of Operation Northwoods, literally called Operation Dirty Trick because the CIA seemingly isn't big on irony, the John Glenn Mercury space mission in 1962 had a plan to blame it all on Cuba if the astronaut ended up dying in space. The plan stated their intention to, quote, provide irrevocable proof that should the Mercury manned orbit flight fail, the fault lines with the communists et al. Cuba by manufacturing various pieces of evidence which would prove electronic interference on the part of the Cubans, unquote. Thankfully, John Glenn returned to Earth safely, so this shockingly petty plan didn't see the light of day until decades later. Fact 29. The CIA faked a vampire attack in the Philippines. As part of their plan to crush the Huk Rebellion in the Philippines in the early 1950s, they brought in Psy-War expert and mythology enthusiast Edward Lansdale, who had a unique plan for clearing a particularly difficult Huk fort. He used his knowledge of a local myth to fake the attack of an Aswang, a frightening Filipino vampire, by puncturing the neck of a Huk rebel and bleeding him dry. It was a truly horrific method, but it was effective. The Huk fort was rattled and soon cleared when word spread of the potential Aswang attack, proving that the CIA can often come in clutch with the scariest idea you've ever heard. Fact 30. The CIA tried to create a weaponized weather machine. During the Vietnam War, Operation Sober Popeye was the CIA's plan to seed clouds and extend Vietnam's natural monsoon season to wage a weatherized war of attrition against their jungle commando enemies. But this plan was scuppered in 1978 when international courts declared the use of weather-manipulating devices in warfare as a war crime. Though in fairness, things being a war crime has never stopped the CIA before. They've been known to do some truly horrifying things to their own people, such as Fact 31. The CIA's horrifying mind control experiments, MK-Ultra. That's right, time for an MK-Ultra lightning round. This brainchild of chemist spymaster Sidney Gottlieb is one of the most infamous things the CIA has ever done. The experiments ran from 1953 to 1973 and primarily involved explorations into the interrogation and mind control applications of LSD, as well as MDMA, heroin, mescaline, barbiturates, meth, and magic mushrooms. And you'd be amazed at the level of mind-boggling insanity Sidney Gottlieb and his associates managed to fit into those 20 years of testing. Fact 32. The CIA hired Nazi war criminals from the Dachau concentration camp to help with MK-Ultra. Vivisectionists and war criminals who worked for both the Nazis and Japan's infamous Unit 731 were brought to Fort Detrick in Maryland to lecture CIA agents on their findings. The Dachau staff were of particular interest due to their experiments on concentration camp prisoners using mescaline, and some of the experiments conducted under the MK-Ultra banner were even modeled after Nazi methodology. Fact 33. There were allegedly CIA sites across the globe where these experiments were being conducted. There's evidence of MK-Ultra experiments being undertaken throughout Europe and Asia, where unwitting enemies of the state were subjected to extreme experimentation without the same legal entanglements the CIA would face experimenting on American soil. The purpose of these experiments was the destruction of the human ego through drugging, electroshock therapy, isolation, temperature control, and psychological torture. The purpose was to essentially render the mind a blank slate, where Gottlieb and his co-conspirators could build whatever they pleased. Fact 34. Some nightmarish experiments unfolded in Canada under MKUltra. The Allen Memorial Institute, under the direction of Scottish psychiatrist Donald Ewan Cameron, played host to the Montreal experiments, which were funded by the CIA front organization, the Society for the Investigation of Human Ecology. Some of these experiments involved shocking drugged patients with significantly more power than typical electroshock therapy, while others involved inducing months-long comas, while the subjects were forced to listen to looping audio tapes. Some people subjected to Cameron's experiments effectively lost their minds, entering an infantile state where they experienced symptoms like urinary incontinence, severe amnesia, and even the belief that the researchers were their parents. Fact 35. Gottlieb and the CIA director tried to destroy evidence of MKUltra. In 1973, in one of the few good decisions of President Richard Nixon, he removed Richard Helms as director of the CIA. Helms was one of the greatest supporters of Sidney Gottlieb's continued research, so with him out, MKUltra's days were thankfully numbered. Knowing that they'd committed a lot of horrific violations of both the law and general ethics, Helms and Gottlieb conspired to eliminate as much evidence of MKUltra as they possibly could. Gottlieb even loaded boxes of files from the CIA archive into his car and instructed them to be destroyed, but Helms and Gottlieb missed files that were stored elsewhere. As a result, the existence of MKUltra was revealed to the world 2 years later, in 1975, by Senator Frank Church, in the very same committee hearings where he debuted the heart attack pistol. This would only result in more horrifying discoveries about the project. Fact 36. MKUltra killed a tennis player. Many people lost their lives and minds to MKUltra, but one of the strangest ones is the tragic case of Harold Blauer. This unfortunate professional tennis player checked into New York State Psychiatric Institute in 1952 due to suffering from a bout of depression following his divorce. There, he became a lab rat for the Army Chemical Corps under the MKUltra umbrella. He was injected with various chemical analogs for mescaline throughout his stay, experiencing severe hallucinations. Eventually, he was given an overdose of the chemical 3,4-methylene dioxyamphetamine, also known as MDA, which caused him to slip into a coma and die later that day. The CIA and the state of New York covered this up for 22 years until the revelations eventually came out during committee hearings. But it wasn't just innocent tennis players who became unwitting guinea pigs. Fact 37. The CIA performed MKUltra experiments on infamous gangster Whitey Bulger. While imprisoned for his extensive life of crime, Bulger was coerced into MKUltra experiments that he was told were research for the benefit of mental health. He and other inmates were given drug cocktails and were subjected to batteries of the typical strange and unethical tests. But this is particularly interesting because Bulger was able to describe his own experience in the program firsthand. Quote, 8 convicts in a panic and paranoid state, total loss of appetite, hallucinating. The room would change shape, hours of paranoia and feeling violent. We experienced horrible periods of living nightmares and even blood coming out of the walls, guys turning into skeletons in front of me. I saw a camera change into the head of a dog. I felt like I was going insane. It definitely doesn't sound like a good trip, but we can think of a worse one. Fact 38. The CIA performed experiments on unwitting brothel patrons. No, you did not hear that wrong. It was part of an MKUltra subdivision known as Operation Midnight Climax. Primarily operated by ex-narcotics investigator George White, the CIA rigged certain rooms and safe houses with surveillance equipment and recruited sex workers to bring their clients there and dose them with LSD for observation. The women were paid in both small cash tokens and immunity from prosecution for their sex work. And George White would later say that he enjoyed this work mainly because he liked getting to spy on people having sex while drugged. In his own words, "I toiled wholeheartedly in the vineyards because it was fun, fun, fun. Where else could a red-blooded American boy lie, kill, cheat, steal, and pillage with the sanction and blessing of the All-Highest?" It seemed that pretty much everyone involved in this project was a massive weirdo. Fact 39. The MKUltra experiments inspired Stranger Things. In the hit Netflix show, Eleven has psychic powers because of her mother being an experimental subject of the MKUltra experiments. And the show's creators, the Duffer Brothers, have said multiple times that the experiments were one of the major inspirations behind the government conspiracy side of the show, along with the conspiratorial Project Montauk. The CIA never encountered a real psychic little girl or a demogorgon during their experiences, mainly just huge amounts of horrific malpractice. Fact 40. The CIA tried to control the news. Operation Mockingbird was the pet project of Frank Wisner, head of the CIA's Office of Special Projects, to get a stranglehold over the American print media and broadcasting during the early years of the Cold War. He gained influence over key figures in the New York Times, CBS, and members of the Washington Press Corps, allegedly having 3,000 CIA employees embedded throughout major news organizations at the height of the project. These employees suppressed certain stories and planted others, making sure the media narrative could be massaged in the interests of the CIA. So when you watch the news, you never really know what message you're receiving. Fact 41. They tried using poisoned toothpaste to kill a Congolese prime minister. Patrice Lumumba oversaw the Democratic Republic of the Congo split from Belgian rule in 1960, leading to the CIA to worry he'd drag the country toward communism, mainly due to Lumumba's anti-colonial policies and his desire to preserve his country's independence. Of course, the Congo also contained mineral deposits sought after by both the US and Belgium, so the CIA drew up plans to assassinate Lumumba and install someone more sympathetic to American interests in his place. There were many plots to kill Lumumba, with the strangest being an attempt to poison his toothpaste, which was quickly discarded by the recruit they'd put in charge of carrying it out. The CIA still got what they wanted in the end, as Lumumba was eventually captured and executed by Katangan separatists. To this day, he's seen as a martyr by the people of the Pan-African movement for his fearless adherence to his principles, even in the face of death. Fact 42. They used a fake vaccine plot to help catch bin Laden. As part of their ongoing quest to find Osama bin Laden, the architect of the 9/11 terrorist attacks, the CIA set up a fake hepatitis vaccination scheme in the neighborhood of bin Laden's compound as a front to investigate the area and possibly collect a DNA sample confirming the presence of one of his many children. This method was strongly condemned by Uni Karunakara, the international president of the nonprofit Doctors Without Borders, who claimed it would encourage distrust between citizens and medical professionals, saying, "The risk is that vulnerable communities anywhere needing access to essential health services will understandably question the true motivation of medical workers and humanitarian aid." Fact 43. The CIA reads 5 million tweets per day. Just in case you need to feel better about your own potential Twitter addiction, the CIA has reported that it studies 5 million different tweets in a variety of languages to assess the mood of different areas in the aftermath of major foreign policy decisions. For example, in the aftermath of bin Laden's assassination, the Open Source Center was wired into the collective reaction of the Middle East Twitter's feelings on that matter. We would hate to be one of the many employees tasked with wading through the Twitterscape every day, whether for general impressions or actionable intelligence. Fact 44. They had a manual on deception written by a master magician. John E. McLaughlin, former deputy director of the CIA, once said magic and intelligence are really kindred arts. This must be why they hired magician John Mulholland to write a handbook on deception and trickery for $3,000 in 1953. It was just another one of the many insane documents created under the MKUltra banner, and was thought to have been destroyed in 1973 until two agents realized they happened to still have copies. It was full of handy little tips, like the fact that agents who look dopey or disheveled are less likely to be noticed, how secret pockets are perfect for hiding weapons or documents, and how you can smuggle yourself out of a building inside a crate. Useful stuff, really. Fact 45. The CIA is less than a century old. Despite having an insanely storied history, the CIA as it is today wasn't created until 1947, though it had a few precursor organizations, including the Office of the Coordinator of Information, the Office of Strategic Services, the Strategic Services Unit, and the Central Intelligence Group, in that order. Fact 46. They kept a bizarre list of Soviet jokes for the deputy director. We don't have much of an explanation for this one. It could have been for the deputy director's personal use or some kind of social function, but we will share one of the jokes from the official CIA Soviet joke list here. What's the difference between Gorbachev and Dubček? Nothing, but Gorbachev doesn't know it yet. We guess you had to be there. Fact 47. The CIA armed Islamic extremists in the Iran-Contra affair. It's probably the most famous CIA scandal of all time. The CIA facilitated the illegal sale of arms to Iran, which was subject to an arms embargo at the time. Why? Because they were hoping to use the proceeds to fund the Contras, a gang of anti-Sandinista rebels in Nicaragua. It's considered one of the biggest embarrassments of the Reagan administration. Fact 48. They are alleged to have helped depose an Australian Prime Minister. Gough Whitlam, an Australian Prime Minister from 1972 to 1975, made enemies of both MI6 and the CIA when he strove to make Australia a more independent nation from the British and the United States, even threatening to shut down a CIA base in Pine Gap. While opinions are divided on the issue, it's believed by many that the CIA influenced Governor General Sir John Kerr to dismiss Whitlam from the position of Prime Minister and place a politician from the opposition who was far more sympathetic to the CIA's interests in his place. This resulted in the 1975 Australian constitutional crisis, one of Australia's most controversial political incidents. To this day, both the CIA and Kerr deny any collusion took place. Fact 49. The CIA has a kill list, maintained by the Counterterrorism Center or CTC. This list of individuals is the top priority for assassination under the CIA's mandate. After the CIA puts the information together, the CIA's lawyers, the General Counsel, and the head of the National Clandestine Service make the determination on whether the hit will be carried out. If this raises certain questions about extrajudicial executions and the lack of a fair trial, well, you definitely wouldn't be alone on those criticisms. Fact 50. The CIA had a torture training manual. Titled Human Resource Exploitation Training Manual, this book of torture techniques was distributed to the Honduran military by the CIA. In what feels like an almost comical attempt at plausible deniability, the book opens with a note that says, quote, "We will discuss some of those coercive techniques that have been used by many and the reasons why we are against the use of these techniques. We do not use these techniques, nor do we condone the use of them." Unquote. It was very generous of the CIA to give Honduran militants a list of exact instructions on how to torture people just to make sure none of them did it by accident. The CIA is just very humanitarian like that. From the CIA magician to the FBI assassinations to the Pentagon's attempts to weaponize everything, from exploding bats to fake goat poop, we're throwing open the American government's closet and exposing their skeletons. This is 50 insane declassified USA secrets you didn't know. Number 50. The CIA literally had a torture training manual. The CIA had a torture training manual. It was called Human Resource Exploitation Training Manual, and it was given to the fine torturers of the Honduran military by the CIA during one of their many, many South American excursions. If this didn't have enough supervillain vibes already, you should see the opening note in the book. Quote, "We will discuss some of those coercive techniques that have been used by many and the reasons why we are against the use of these techniques. We do not use these techniques, nor do we condone the use of them. No offense, CIA, but we totally believe you." Number 49. McCarthyism in the US didn't actually start with Senator Joseph McCarthy, and it certainly didn't end with him. The FBI wanted to keep tabs on any celebrities that they suspected were communist sympathizers or were against the Vietnam War. To give you an insanely abridged list, they spied on, among many, many others, Charlie Chaplin, Groucho Marx, John Lennon, Frank Sinatra, Elvis, Michael Jackson, Bob Dylan, Marilyn Monroe, and the boxing goat Muhammad Ali. Number 48. In October 1950, 11 people from the San Francisco Bay Area were admitted to Stanford Hospital, suffering very severe urinary tract infections. When the doctors took urine samples of the patients, they noted the presence of a strange red-colored bacteria, later identified as Serratia marcescens. Tragically, one patient died from the infection. The grim outcome was traced back to Operation Sea Spray, a U.S. Navy experiment in which two types of bacteria, Serratia marcescens and Bacillus globigi, were sprayed into the air over a major American city to test how a biological weapon might spread. Number 47. The CIA has an actual kill list, maintained by the Counterterrorism Center or CTC. This list of individuals is the top priority for assassination under the CIA's mandate. After the CTC puts the information together, the CIA's lawyers, the General Counsel, and the head of the National Clandestine Service make the determination on whether the hit will be carried out. Number 46. A document uncovered by a 1993 Freedom of Information Act request by the New York Times revealed that Walt Disney worked with the FBI. He regularly ratted out fellow Hollywood workers with un-American communist ties, as well as enlisting their help in his personal strike and union-busting efforts down at the Magic Kingdom. This wasn't some one-off arrangement either. He was actually so tight with the FBI that he was given the title Full Special Agent in Charge Contact in 1954. He was even granted the extremely rare rights to film inside FBI buildings because they knew good old Walt would always give them favorable coverage. Number 45. Project Mockingbird in the 1960s was a phone tapping operation where the CIA kept tabs on critical elements in the press. Operation Mockingbird is somehow even more weird and sinister. Well into the 1970s, the CIA had up to 100 journalists on the take. They essentially contracted them to be spies on both foreign and domestic targets in exchange for feeding them exclusive scoops from the CIA front desk. This quid pro quo relationship was insanely unethical and was actually discovered by Carl Bernstein, one of the two famous reporters who blew up the Watergate story that sank Richard Nixon. Number 44. The US might have deposed an Australian Prime Minister. The fact that the US has pushed for regime change in other countries is no secret by now, but it's still pretty shocking that they might have played a hand in the controversial downfall of an English-speaking world leader. Gough Whitlam, an Australian Prime Minister from 1972 to 1975, made enemies of both MI6 and the CIA when he strove to make Australia a more independent nation, one free from the British and the United States. He went as far as threatening to shut down a CIA base in Pine Gap. The CIA insists it had nothing to do with Governor General Sir John Kerr's decision to dismiss Whitlam and replace him with an opposition politician, but given their history, that is a little hard to believe. Number 43. The FBI decided to do a little homegrown political interference in the 1930s, only 22 years after it was formed. The feds were caught wiretapping communications that came in and out of the Supreme Court conference room. You know, the place where the U.S.'s highest judges in the land convene to mediate on decisions. J. Edgar Hoover, a man who is about as trustworthy as an authority figure as Ted Bundy would be as a Lyft driver, insisted it was just an effort to stop people from leaking Supreme Court decisions. Sure. Number 42. The Office of Strategic Services, or OSS, was the precursor organization to the CIA. In 1944, they published the Simple Sabotage Field Manual, a guide showing how civilians sympathetic to the Allied cause could subtly disrupt Axis operations from behind enemy lines. It offers specific instructions on how fires might be accidentally started in occupying Nazi barracks. The manual also recommends that mechanics forced to work on Nazi vehicles should keep their tools dull and dirty to increase the likelihood of those vehicles breaking down later. It also suggests that people in administrative positions do their jobs as slowly as possible and find as many ways to mishear direct instructions as they can. Number 41. A true relic from the CIA's long history of covert misdeeds, they helped arms dealers violate the weapons embargo on Iran, turning a secret arms deal into a lucrative payday. And their reason for doing it was even more sleazy. They wanted to use the proceeds to fund the Contras, a gang of anti-Sandinista rebels in Nicaragua where they were, yeah, you guessed it, pushing for regime change. Number 40. In 1985, a U.S. congressional report on wiretapping and civil liberties revealed that between 1940 and 1960, the FBI had conducted surveillance on more than 7,000 American citizens. And thanks to both advances in technology and post-9/11 paranoia sweeping the United States, things got even worse with the passing of the Patriot Act. The FBI used the Patriot Act sunset provision as an excuse to track all U.S. telephone calls. They also made wide use of exigent letters, a provision that allowed them to get around information gathering protocols by claiming it was an emergency. Number 39. In February of 1968, a Soviet ballistic missile submarine called the K-129 missed its designated check-ins and went radio silent. The ship was declared missing in March of that year. Turns out the ship had sunk, and in 1970, Defense Secretary Melvin Laird and National Security Advisor Henry Kissinger made a clandestine proposal. What better way to study exactly what the Russians were up to than by lifting the wreck of the K-129 and studying it? President Richard Nixon accepted the proposal and put the CIA on the case. The moonshot became known as Project Azorian. A ship was built specifically to retrieve the wreck, but the K-129 ended up falling to pieces underwater in the process. Only one part was ever salvaged, and we don't know if any useful intel came about from it, but we do know that Project Azorian cost the equivalent of $5.1 billion in today's money. Number 38. The CIA kept a document full of jokes about the Soviets for the organization's deputy director. Maybe to read out loud at a dinner party, who knows? Here's one of the better ones though. A man goes into a shop and asks, "You don't have any meat?" "No," replies the sales lady. "We don't have any fish. It's the store across the street that doesn't have any meat." This comedy gold was declassified in 2013. Number 37. The FBI doesn't need to think you're a threat to spy on you. The Black Student Union was a group looking out for the rights of African Americans in universities across the states. This was especially important at the time because they'd actually only just been integrated with the fall of long-held segregationist Jim Crow policies. The FBI files on the group said it was dormant, incompetent, and showing, quote, "no radical or militant ideas." Despite this, the file recommended that the agent still spy on, infiltrate, and gather blackmail material on the group. Number 36. The Stargate project was a government initiative aimed at weaponizing physics during the Cold War. It was operated under the Defense Intelligence Agency and had 3 stated goals. 1. Determine how to apply remote viewing to intelligence gathering against foreign targets. 2. Figure out how other countries could be doing the same thing and using it against the US. And 3. Perform laboratory experiments to find ways to improve remote viewing for use in the intelligence field. For anyone who is hoping to join the US Army as some kind of psychic super soldier, we're sorry to tell you this project yielded no worthwhile results. Speaking of weaponizing magic, though, number 35. John E. McLaughlin, former deputy director of the CIA, once said, "Magic and intelligence are really kindred arts." This must be why they hired a magician, John Mulholland, to write a handbook on deception and trickery for $3,000 in 1953. It was full of handy little tips. Things like agents who look dopey or disheveled are less likely to be noticed, how secret pockets are perfect for hiding weapons or documents, and how you can smuggle yourself out of a building inside of a crate. Maybe there was also a note in there about how you could beat a democratically elected South American leader to death with a rabbit you pulled out of a hat. Who knows? Number 34. After Lieutenant Colonel Jim Channon got involved in the New Age movement in California, he began pondering whether those principles could be weaponized. He wanted to create an army of so-called warrior monks that he dubbed the First Earth Battalion. This racially diverse group of soldiers would harness rainbow power and utilize the heightened perception of New Age belief systems to get the edge over their enemies on the battlefield. However, these would be peaceful warriors who would always seek nonviolent conflict resolution first and foremost, because their loyalty would be to the planet itself above all nations. Naturally, upon hearing that, he was likely laughed out of the room. Number 33. Considering the long-standing feud between China and Tibet, China wants to own it, and Tibet's not exactly thrilled about that. It's hardly shocking that the Dalai Lama isn't feeling very zen about Chinese expansionism. Neither, as you probably guessed, are the CIA, so it makes sense that they had worked together. Reports based on U.S. intelligence accounts indicate that beginning in 1960, the CIA provided the Dalai Lama with an annual stipend of $180,000. It was part of a broader effort to fund the Tibetan exile movement during the Cold War. Number 32. A Portland Muslim named Jonas Fikre attends a mosque where at least 9 different people have been forbidden from flying. He's among the several people who claimed that the FBI was using a no-fly list as a threat for Muslims who aren't willing to become spies on their own community on the FBI's behalf. That is the choice. Either you agree to be a rat on the people who attend your mosque services, or you kiss your flying privileges goodbye. But the FBI has also allegedly done a lot worse to Muslims who refuse to become stool pigeons for them. Number 31. Jonas Fikri also claimed that when he refused to become an informant for the FBI, he was dragged to a foreign jail where he was tortured as punishment. And he's not the only one who claimed this. Jamal Tarhouni and Michael Migliore, to name at least 2, may have gone through similar ordeals. Number 30. The CIA tried and failed to kill Castro 634 different times. They spiked a bunch of cigars with the botulinum toxin, hoping that would send the tobacco-loving dictator to his grave, but the cigars were somehow lost in the shuffle and never reached Castro. To this day, no one knows what actually happened to them. Someone also floated the idea of hiding a bomb inside of a painted seashell that they hoped would attract Castro's attention and lure him into his death. And if the shell didn't get him, maybe his diving suit would, which the CIA planned to fill with a fungus that would give him a debilitating skin disease. They also tried to hide a deadly syringe full of poison into a pen that could then be used to inject Castro if one of the assassins was able to get close enough. Number 29. And you thought your doom-scrolling problem was bad. The CIA has reported that it studies 5 million different posts on X each day. The agency sifts through content in dozens of languages to measure global reactions to major U.S. foreign policy moves. In the aftermath of bin Laden's assassination, the Open Source Center was wired into the collective reaction of the Middle East's Twitter feelings on the matter. That's probably worse for your average CIA agent's mental health than all the extrajudicial torture and assassinations. Number 28. Operation Paperclip. President Truman's 1945 immigration project ran for 14 years. Its goal was to extract rare minds from Nazi and Imperial Japanese science programs that, well, might have been involved in just a little touch of slavery and human experimentation. The most famous of those repatriated German scientists was Werner von Braun, who developed the infamous V-2 rocket for his former employers with the help of plenty of labor from unpaid concentration camp prisoners. But hey, at least it helped the US beat those commies in a race to the moon. Number 27. The Tuskegee syphilis experiment was a scheme devised by the US Public Health Service in partnership with the Tuskegee Institute. It aimed to study the effects of untreated syphilis by turning around 600 black men into unwitting test subjects. All the while, they were told they were receiving treatment for their painful and debilitating conditions, a lie that lasted for decades. The study was kept under wraps for 40 years before the shameful exploitation of these men was revealed for all to see. In 1974, there was a $10 million payout to the surviving victims of the program, but nothing could ever give them back the years that were wasted in unnecessary suffering. But we can think of an even gnarlier secret government science experiment. Number 26. Project Sunshine is a 1950s study on the effects of radiation on human bodies. It goes without saying that this is extremely important research, but that doesn't mean it was conducted ethically. In order to have a varied collection of data, the scientists involved in this project had their personnel steal parts of corpses, like Victorian grave robbers, including those of children and even infants. This would be macabre but ultimately ethical if the families had consented to donate their relatives' bodies to science, but when those tests were performed, the families had no idea. Number 25. Joseph the Animal Barbosa Jr. was a brutal mob hitman who murdered at least 20 people from 1964 to 1970. He got pinched by the FBI and decided to become an informant to save his skin. But this didn't stop him from killing people. He did another assassination in 1965 while under the care of the FBI, but they didn't want to lose him as a valuable informant, so 4 others were sent down for that murder instead. Number 24. The US government really did consider making a gay bomb. The idea is simple: an aphrodisiac chemical weapon that makes enemy soldiers both attracted to one another and too horny to function effectively in combat. It seems so patently stupid compared to conventional weapons, but the US Air Force was really working on this as recently as 1994. If funded, the project would have cost $7.5 million. Naturally, it didn't get to that stage and would instead be leaked to the public, where it received a lot of deserved ridicule. Number 23. During the decade-long search for Osama bin Laden, the CIA floated countless methods to track down the elusive terrorist leader. One of those was an undercover sting operation disguised as a hepatitis vaccination scheme. But the true aim was to get a DNA sample from one of bin Laden's many children, confirming his presence in the area. The method was strongly condemned by Uni Karunakara, the former international president of the nonprofit Doctors Without Borders. He claimed it would encourage distrust between citizens and medical professionals. Number 22. It sounds like a high-tech gadget more fitting for a James Bond movie than real life, but the CIA really made a heart attack gun. It was revealed during the Church Committee inquiries of the 1970s. How did it work? Well, the gun was designed to fire out frozen projectiles containing highly potent shellfish neurotoxin, which would induce a heart attack in the victim. Meanwhile, the projectile itself melted away without a trace. Number 21. During the Vietnam War, the CIA engaged in a secret project called Operation Sober Popeye. This was a plot to control the very weather in Vietnam and use it as a weapon in the war against the Viet Cong. For years, the CIA attempted to seed rain clouds in Vietnam that would extend the country's natural monsoon season, bogging down their forest-dwelling commando enemies. They didn't fully succeed, and in 1978, military applications of weather-manipulating technology was classified as a war crime. Number 20. The FBI helped assassinate Black Panther leaders. Black Panther leader Fred Hampton, along with fellow organizer Mark Clark, was killed in a pre-dawn Chicago police raid on December 4, 1969. An operation widely believed to be a part of J. Edgar Hoover's campaign against so-called subversives. The story at the time was that there had been a brutal shootout that simply left the Black Panther leaders dead. In reality, the police had fired between 90 and 99 rounds, and the Panthers had only returned 1. The Panthers' head of security, William O'Neill, was an FBI informant and slipped Hampton a sedative before the raid that took his life. The FBI also had a detailed floor plan of the apartment where the raid took place, indicating that they may have had some part in the planning of the whole sordid affair. Number 19. The U.S. almost conducted false flag terrorist attacks on itself. The plot was called Operation Northwoods, and in the early 1960s, when the U.S. was just itching for a pretense to go to war with Cuba, one member of the plot, a high-ranking figure in the U.S. military brass, suggested blowing up a U.S. ship in Cuban waters to get the public riled up for war. The plan was shot down by JFK himself when it landed on his desk, but it is insane it ever got that far. Number 18. The Congo has endured a brutal legacy of Western colonialism and imperialism, stretching back to the atrocities of King Leopold II's Congo Free State. For many Congolese, Patrice Lumumba's leadership represented a chance to finally break free from Belgium's grip. But the CIA worried that Lumumba's anti-colonialist policies might lead to communism, so they tried to kill him by poisoning his food, and maybe even his toothpaste. The plan failed, and Lumumba was instead murdered by Katongan separatists in 1961. Number 17. Under the guidance of the infamous chemist Sidney Gottlieb, nicknamed the Poisoner-in-Chief, the CIA embarked on one of the most notorious experiments. Drawing on methods borrowed from Nazi and Imperial Japanese war criminals, the agency sought to explore whether LSD could be used to create mind-controlled sleeper agents for Cold War operations. And somehow, that isn't the craziest part of MKUltra. Number 16. Operation Midnight Climax was carried out by CIA consultant George Hunter White and the Federal Bureau of Narcotics in Boston, Massachusetts, along with a whole bunch of sex workers that were on the CIA payroll. Men were lured back into honeypot brothels, where they were unknowingly dosed with LSD. The sex workers would test whether being under the influence of the drug made them divulge extremely personal secrets. But MKUltra actually had an even more infamous application. Number 15. James Whitey Bulger, the Boston gangster who was the basis for Jack Nicholson's character in The Departed, became one of MKUltra's test subjects. He was dosed with LSD while in prison and had horrifying hallucinations as a result. Number 14. The U.S. created bat bombs during World War II, and we mean that literally. An experimental weapons initiative called Project X-Ray, which cost the equivalent of around $35 million in today's money. It intended to strap bombs to bats and release them into Japan. The project was a disaster, and in the most prominent test, the bats were released too early and not only exploded a barn, but the car of one of the generals attending the test. Number 13. The space race was basically one of the biggest manhood measuring contests in human history. When Russia took the lead by launching the Sputnik satellite in 1957, the US wanted to get its honor back in the most insane way possible by nuking the moon. The hope was it would create a mushroom cloud for the whole world to see and show off US dominance. The plan was rejected because it's one of the dumbest ideas ever. But sometimes, like our next plan, a dumb idea can actually work. Number 12. The CIA faked a vampire attack in the Philippines. In order to squash a rebellion, a psyop was conducted to grab one of the rebels patrolling near a deeply embedded rebel fort. He was hung upside down and his throat punctured to drain him of blood. The plan was to draw on the deep cultural fear of the aswang, a Filipino vampire variant. Shockingly, it worked, and it's also deeply messed up. And this was not the only time they tried something like this. Number 11. Operation Fantasia was another plot that aimed to draw on deep cultural fears of its victims. In this case, the fear of the kitsune, a diabolical Japanese fox spirit. The US planned to use glowing fox balloons and fox cries to achieve this. Unsurprisingly, the idea was terrible and it did not work. Number 10. The US government was considering nuking Alaska. A less ambitious target than the moon, but it's still absolutely nuts. It was part of a wider operation called Project Chariot, which hoped to find non-weapon uses for nuclear explosives. In this case, they pondered whether a nuke could blow up a part of Alaska and make an artificial harbor. It's a miracle that the US has survived this long. Number 9. As part of the Edgewood Arsenal program, the project director, L. Wilson Green, wanted to test any chemicals that would induce seizures, panic hysteria, hallucinations, and delirium. And he did, testing them on volunteering soldiers who had no idea what they were signing up for. Number 8. One of the key fronts during World War II was North Africa, where Allied soldiers faced off against the deadly Nazi Afrika Korps under General Erwin Rommel. One OSS officer suggested weakening the Nazis by spreading disease among their division using synthetic goat dung loaded with pathogens, a plan called Project Capricious. Get it? Capricorn goats? The plan was rejected and they used bullets instead. Number 7. During the early 1950s, the CIA pursued any angles of resistance against the Soviets that they could find, and one of those was promoting American ideals through art. To this end, the CIA helped fund galleries showing abstract art from figures like Jackson Pollock and Willem de Kooning across the world. Their logic was that such art could never be produced under a communist state where free thought was suppressed. By promoting this art, they were promoting the American ideal. Number 6. Both the CIA and the KGB wanted to use sex tapes as compromat against the extremely popular Indonesian president Sukarno. Some reports even allege that the CIA did this by using a performer in incredibly realistic rubber masks and a Sukarno lookalike. The plot was a failure, however, and possibly for an extremely funny reason. Some reports indicate that Sukarno was strangely flattered by the sex tapes and asked the KGB and CIA to send him copies. Number 5. The Pentagon has a program for investigating UFOs. It's called the Advanced Aerospace Threat Identification Program, and it is the contingent of military brass researching unidentified aerial phenomena, or UAPs. Number 4. Back in 2011, a group of CIA informants was rumbled by Hezbollah in Beirut after they used the code word pizza to describe a secret intelligence meeting at a Pizza Hut. While an anonymous U.S. official denies that the meeting happened in an actual Pizza Hut, retired CIA official Robert Baer was quoted as saying, "If they were genuine spies spying against Hezbollah, I don't think we'll ever see them again." Number 3. During the 1970s, CIA spies in Moscow needed a quick distraction when they were being pursued by Soviet counterspies. One proposed idea was known as the Jack-in-the-Box, or JIB, inspired by inflatable sex dolls. It would be a small device that upon the press of a button would essentially inflate a fake agent to momentarily confuse the pursuer. Number 2. In a process disturbingly described as torture light, Iraqi prisoners were interrogated by the CIA in rooms sealed tight and blasted with music at ear-splitting volumes. The playlist at this nightmare disco included, among many others, Metallica's Enter Sandman, Queen's We Are the Champions, and I Love You by Barney the Purple Dinosaur. Number 1. A declassified memo showed that the agency had influence over the 2012 film Zero Dark 30, a biopic about the hunt for Osama bin Laden. They wanted to make sure that they were presented in a positive light by demanding changes such as making the protagonist an observer rather than a participant in a waterboarding scene. They also removed a scene where vicious dogs are used to interrogate a prisoner, and they cut a scene where agents party with AK-47s on a rooftop. The USA has its fair share of secrets, but no agency guards them more fiercely than the CIA. Watch 50 insane facts about the CIA you never knew to uncover what they don't want you to find out, or click on this video instead.